Hey, I'm going to call the Town of Essex Selectboard meeting for Monday, December 2nd, 2024 to order. First item on our agenda is, are there any agenda additions or changes from staff?
One item to go with business item 6B, the work session on the budget. Kendall had sent in a budget proposal earlier today, so I have left that at each of your seats for discussion at that time.
All right, any changes from board members? None, okay.
Because I didn't look at my email, did the minutes get corrected? So,
Yes,
okay.
yes. You and Andy
I'm
both
good
got
then.
that.
Oh, yeah. Okay, we're adding an item, a content item to 6B. Do we need to vote to approve that, or?
No, I'm just acknowledging it.
It's not like, okay. All right. So moving on to public to be heard. Public to be heard is a time of the meeting when those attending the meeting can speak to the select board on topics that are not on the, that are either in consent or not on the agenda. If you'd like to raise your hand in the room, please do. Otherwise, online, you can, if you float your cursor down to the bottom of the screen, reactions button will appear. If you click on that, it will offer you the opportunity to raise your hand. And I do see one hand in the room, so come on up, introduce yourself, and have your say.
Well, my name, let's see if I'm on mic. My name is David Scopin, live at 11 Skyline Drive, Town of Essex. And to begin, I wonder if there are any questions or comments about the 18-minute TED Talk. And now it's been over a month or two since I made that available to you all. Did everyone have a chance? I'm assuming you had a chance to see it. What did you think?
I found it fascinating, but
Good information.
yep, I learned a lot.
Yeah, it's unfortunately one of those topics that even though I try to ignore it, it just keeps coming up. And I know that I've got to do something about it. So I'm going to take your suggestion, Greg. I'm going to come up with something. It's going to be an ask for the select board. Certainly what I would love to know is that you all bring the topic up when I'm not around, whenever you have an opportunity, and discuss it to find out how people feel about it. I'm certainly aware of the fact that this is like being hit by a sledgehammer. And I've had 15 or more years to get accustomed to it, and within the last 10 it's become increasingly in my vision. So I've had a lot of time, and I've had a number of sleepless nights and a number of wondering how I'm going to confront my grandkids before they open a hole for me. So this is something it takes quite a bit of time to acclimatize to become willing to accept the fact that this is something that is, and it's not going away. And as you probably all know, scientists have a tendency, and climatologists and meteorologists have a tendency to be a little bit on the conservative side, because you don't want to put yourself out there and say things that upset you or that you think are happening unless you're absolutely sure. So the science is rock solid. I would find probably few people that would be willing to rationally look at that and find holes in it. So what am I asking? Quite clearly, we need a new position in the town of Essex. I suggest we have a climate change mitigation officer. Now, this is going to be something that's going to cost money. It's something I haven't found real easy to find, because there's just not, you go to the colleges and they're not necessarily training specifically for climate change mitigation. But I'm sure I'll try Middlebury College, and hopefully I'll have some success here in the next few days and be able to report back to you next time we meet. But it's something that we just need. And there's an awful lot of really exciting things that I see happening in my community. And one of them is that we have the opportunity to put in housing centrally located up near the Essex Experience in 2 different properties. And possibly, if we were able to encourage that land by the golf course to be sold off to a developer, 3 possibilities. And with the new service center going in almost within stone's throw of all that, that would make an amazing core facility for the community to grow into, and hopefully we'd even have some affordable housing so we could have people coming in that we were hoping to have work for us. So with that, I thank you very much for your time. I hope you give it thought, and I hope that when we meet in 2 weeks, you have questions if you have them, and comments. So with that, I'll bid you adieu. Thanks again.
All right, thank you, David. So anyone else wishing to speak during public to be heard? I don't see any hands in the room. I don't see any hands online. So let's move to consent agenda.
I make the motion, we accept the consent agenda as corrected. For those
Thank-
of you that don't know, there was a name that was left off on the 18th.
Oh, Kendall's name was left off of the attendance list. Yeah.
So it's
the
been
minutes.
corrected.
Thank you, Don. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ethan. All those in favor of approving consent with that correction to the minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes 4-0. Moving on to our first business item, which is consider approval of fire department impact fee study and authorization of staff to begin work on impact fee ordinance. Come on up.
Good evening. I will start the show to introduce John Slayson.
Sorry. If you're gonna talk,
Not for very long, that's why I'm over on this side. As a reminder, Mr. John Slayson, who has been conducting the impact fee for us, you last met with him in about February of this year, and for Karen's benefit, that's Mr. Slayson, that you've been reading the report. With that, I will turn it over to Steve Trenholm, who he has been working with John through this project for the last year and is probably our resident expert on all things impact fee related as it pertains to the fire department.
thanks, Chief. Goes without saying, though, that when you have a core of a former police officer that is also a longtime fire chief and a deputy chief who's also been in the fire service for a long time, and their chosen professions are both in the building trades, and you couple that with a CPA, John had a pretty good group to work with, and then top it off with all the help we got from the administration, which was very much appreciated. So, a couple of things I'd like to go over before we start the presentation, just to kind of set the stage. First, I just want to make clear that the recommendations and results in this are not tied to the town complex project. Okay, this is fire department only. If the design and needs in the study show future needs of the fire department and the town complex is not built, that doesn't mean that we don't still have those future needs. I know there's been some consternation with everything that's in the report and tying it into what Stantec has, and I just wanted to make sure that we're all clear that this is separate and distinct from that project. Now, if it can be part of that project, that would be great because we'd get some economies of scale. But just wanted to make sure that that is plain. The second thing is that the impact fee does not cover certain things. One of the key things is what's noted, and John will go over it in his report, are the current deficiencies. We have some identified deficiencies right now to give the level of service that we are accustomed to, you've asked for, and that we do give today. Impact fees do not cover any of the deficiencies. They only cover future costs due to future growth. So that's important to know too. And along that line, if we look at Essex Rescue, for instance, nothing to do with Essex Rescue other than some of the building footprint and maybe some of the improvements, those would not be subject to impact fees as well, because Essex Rescue is not a town department. These impact fees can only be used for town department equipment, facilities, etc. And as John will very nicely explain, the impact fees are tied to costs. They're not tied to a specific building, drawing, etc. They can be flexible as well. Once you approve the study and once the ordinance is passed, or actually it will go, you approve the study, the town administration will draw up the ordinance passes, now the impact fees are fluid. You can't nail an impact fee because things change and they change rapidly. The other thing to note too is this is not a revenue stream. The impact fees can't be relied on as a revenue stream because you can't, these are based on predicted growth. We could have 20 new homes versus 20 multifamily apartments, completely different. And that would generate different needs from the fire department as well as different needs, from impact fees and different impact fees collected. So I will turn it over to John and he can go through his report and presentation.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, well, that was a great kind of bottom line summary here, stealing some of the thunder at the end, but it's important to keep in mind as we go through this. Greg has got the presentation up. I've got my own slides in front of me, so we'll just walk through. We've got a number of slides, but we also want to make sure that we have a conversation and answering the questions that I no doubt you have. So I want to just initially go through, level set, bring us back, because it has been almost a year since we met, as to what are impact fees, some of the background to them, and then we'll get into some of the specifics for the fire department. So moving on, the goal really is to introduce the impact fees, do a project overview, what I was hired to do for the fire department, and to discuss the next steps. So we can probably go to slide 4 if you have that down, which is the impact fee concept. So here's some photos from taken around Chittenden County. Namely, you need growth. And this is based on an assumption that I think is well supported by the facts that we have. Essex is growing. We have anticipated growth in both population and employment. And by that regard, we've seen an increase in the demand on our fire department. And so we have a nexus, a legal, allowable, saying that as we have new users in the system, we're going to provide them a similar standard of care that existing users today experience. And so with that increase in demand for services, impact fees are predicated on the concept that we have only a certain amount of people, certain amount of assets, infrastructure, trucks, etc., station space, and that if we have more demand on our existing services, we may not reach everybody that may need to be reached. And so there's potentially for that deterioration of services. So impact fees are made to help mitigate that and to expand the capacity and the capability of our department to respond for the increased demand associated with that land use change and growth. So that's where we have then the additional capacity is that solution that we're looking to fund partially through impact fees. So go ahead to the next slide. Some of the legal statute language here just taken out, just to summarize, is that we need to benefit new users, and the demand for additional capacity is attributed to the new users as they are increasing the demand on our existing services, in this case, the fire department. We know that the existing costs of replacing existing capital, so if we were to replace the existing station, we cannot bear that cost on new growth. We cannot mitigate existing deficiencies. So the fire department would go on at length if we let them to talk about that in an ideal world. We'd have more truck infrastructure, we'd have more space, we'd have ability to protect some of our apparatus in different ways than we do today. And so we do have some deficiencies, and we don't want to belabor that, but these deficiencies can't be borne on the back of growth as well. So that's all stated out in the legal requirements. Some of the Vermont pieces, just to walk us through some of the steps that we're going through here, is that the first process in the statute is that we need a plan. That's what you have in front of you today, is that plan articulates the need. It is simply the legal document that creates the nexus between what we want to collect funds for and what rationale do we have to do that. And so we show that in the absence of new capacity, we're going to deteriorate our standard of services, and that it shows that we have an expectation of new demands on our services. We've articulated standards of service. That's both, you see that there, Greg. You also see the standards of service have been defined. In a fire department, this is a complex way of analyzing. We have a standard of square footage per capita, but as we've discussed, and we'll get a little bit about, is when we offer our fire department services, not every call is treated equally. Not every land use generates the same demand on our services. We also have the reality that as a changing demographics, we're getting older as a society, we're having new, different medical needs, different responses. We're also changing the land use form that we have. We've done some pretty rigorous analysis mapping out all of the calls and associated with them with specific land use types. And we'll notice that certain areas of town generate more calls, and some of those are associated with different densities. And so the fact is that the standard of service is not a straightforward calculation. We need to respond that our demands are changing over time, and so that changes the way that the impact fee is designed. The capital budget and program is part of the response that we're in budgeting phase, and so we need to understand if we collect an impact fee dollar, we need to deliver something for that dollar at the end of the day. So we need to be really walking into this with eyes wide open, is that we create a liability as soon as we create this impact fee as a revenue source. It just can't be relied on as the only revenue source. So the impact fee report goes out and puts that funding formula together and puts together the nexus based on an estimate of costs. We do not have a fixed costs of what the capacity is going to be. We don't have an existing future station that's bonded for and ready to be fully paid. We have an estimate right now. We have a vision for where we're going to go. So this impact fee is a preliminary estimate of what those costs would look like if we were to fairly share it out based on the unit of growth. So until those costs are fixed, these fees are subject to change. And once we nail that down, then that will be confirmed in your ordinance. So at this process, we're really looking for adoption of the study itself. So by all means, partners, jump in if there's anything I'm saying.
Definitely will.
All right. So we'll go to the next slide, please. I think I've just walked through many of these pieces here, but the methodology is that you first need that growth. We've identified some deficiencies in the report. We've talked about that. We talked about mitigation. Partially, the big one in the room is the new station. We also have other aspects. There's other assets that are in this report that we expect to fund through impact fees in addition to other revenues. The costs of that mitigation, meaning the new capacity, and then we have a base fee, and then what we do have in the report, and I don't want to go into all the depth on this call, we can do it in the ordinance conversation as well, but that we have credits, and therefore there's a reduction in your base fee based on other payments that you might be contributing to as a resident of Essex. And so at the end of the day, the net fee is what will be revenue, if you will, from the budget side. Okay, we'll go down 2 slides to slide 8. It's a 3 or 4 column, yeah. Just to, again, remind all of us of my role here, that we've articulated in the study the existing conditions, future conditions, design the fee, and right now we're walking into that last step, that study in the ordinance. So we're accepting, hopefully, the study, and then addressing any comments or questions, and then we'll be pursuing amendments in ordinance and whether we need changes to your capital program, etc. Now, the next few slides, 9 through I guess it's 14, it has a lot of demographic data. We've covered some of that, hasn't changed much from the previous conversation we had in February. I want to just summarize on this slide a couple key points. One is that we've used historical growth along with forecasts that have been established at the regional planning level. That's the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization that we have for Chittenden County. We've married historical growth and these forecasts. Bottom line is that our growth in Essex has exceeded the forecasted growth, and so we're about 4 or 5 years ahead of where the regional plan thought we were. So we've pivoted and looked at those growth rates to align on a forecast that I'll recommend. We've also increased the aging of our population. We're at 7% was over 65 in year 2000. We're at 21% in 2022. These are kind of key numbers just to hold on to because it informs a lot of the needs on the fire department. I'm comfortable, if you are, to skip over the demographic slides because there's a lot of tables, a lot of data there. You tell me if you have any questions on them, but just for benefit of time, I think you have the material, but I'm just happy to address anything that might be of concern or any questions in it. This slide, maybe just pause quickly, one to highlight that you'll see a pretty significant change just in the changes in our residential structure. While they're still small shares overall, you can see in 2012, which was the earliest data that we just went back, 10 years seemed a reasonable number here. But you can see the 10 to 19 units and the 20 plus units was somewhere combined, 6% of the housing share in 2012. And now we're closer to 15, 16% in 2022, I believe that is. 165% growth rate. Now, none of us are surprised. We know the area, we live here. But that number particularly is important because we'll see in some other charts that the higher density uses generate more calls per unit, if you will, than other less dense housing units. And you can see the profound change that Essex has seen. So just something to draw your attention to. I'm comfortable in proceeding. This one, maybe we'll just pause here to give you a bit of context in the report. There's a lot of pages that specifies this. There were 3 forecasts that were set out in the document to provide some low, medium, and high guidance. In an impact fee study, you don't want to be, maybe optimistic is the wrong word, but you don't want to be too excited about the growth rate. You just say you don't want a high growth rate. You also don't want to be too conservative and too low of a growth rate. You want to try to find that mix of a medium ground. Because one thing is that if it's too low, you might be charging too much of your new assets over too few users. If it's too high, that fee might be lower because you're spreading the cost of that infrastructure over too many users. And what Steve pointed out is that if that growth doesn't happen for a year, you want to find that middle of the road. So it's kind of the hedging our bets, is that trying to find both instances of growth option B is my recommendation. Both of them were fast, are a little bit exceeding the long-range planning growth rates that the Regional Planning Commission set out, but they were also a little bit less ambitious than some of the current growth that we've seen. So hopefully it's kind of a middle of the road. This is something that you typically revisit every 5 to 10 years when you have an impact fee. Once you get it going, you say, how are we doing relative to these forecasts? And then you can change the fee structure accordingly.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, by all means.
All right, so on the last slide on the historical employment and then the changes in residential, the historical employment, so I was looking at the number of jobs from 2010 to 22.
Yep.
And I'm just going to use rough numbers, so let's just call it 2,700 and change.
Yeah, difference. Yep.
Yeah, so then I look back at when I was looking at the historical population and housing, there was only roughly, it was 1,300, roughly 1,400 and change in the population. So my question was going to be, and I'm sure you have the answer, but is that although we're growing the workforce, that I know we don't technically have the housing per se, to fill all of the people that work here, and we're never going to have everybody that works in Essex live in Essex. But is it a burden on the town to have that large industrial growth without having any fee to pay for the calls that you may be getting to the Allen Martin and all these other? I just didn't know if there was any comparison in there on a figure, on a cost that industrial side of the growth in this town is having on the residents who are trying to own a single or multi or condos. I didn't know if there was a number to a percentage of what that impact is on from the industrial.
Yeah, what we'll get to it, but basically we do allocate the cost of servicing both residential and employment side. The residential side had some particular facets that why I spent the time to drill it in there. But you'll see that residential is about 70% of the demand on the fire calls. And so we do estimate that we break out 70% of the responsibility is residential, 30% is non-residential. So that's the way that it's broken out. And then if you were to look at at the very end of the presentation or in your report, you'll see there's a per capita fee in your base impact fee for both option A and option B, and there's a per employee fee. So there is that allocation. I also have a chart coming up that talks about the calls in terms of their intensity. I think I only put the residential, no, I do have a slide for the non-residential call analysis as well. So it just kind of shows you the relative scale that the residential versus non-residential does have.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. Any more questions before I want to maybe slide 14? We'll dive into all data.
Can I just add, your question is a good one. The commercial growth in the town does have a larger impact on the fire services that we're able to provide versus a bunch of single-family homes. Single-family homes typically are wood frame construction. They're not required to have sprinklers. They're not required to have alarm systems. So generally our calls to those types of properties are less. Commercial structures, there's specialized equipment that's needed to fight them. There's larger square footage, longer hoses that are needed. There's HVAC equipment, powered equipment, specialized chemicals that require a different approach than just plain water, alarm systems, and then all of the people that are congregated in that one building, many of whom are coming from out of town. So there's also the traffic increase of traffic crashes and the relating things there. So there is a higher impact for the fire services for that type of growth in the town.
Awesome. I just wanted to make sure that there was a separation between growth of the town and growth of,
Yes?
if there was all of a sudden 100 farms overnight, your risk of a fire is
Right.
substantially high. I see the 0.1 call on the farm, and I was like, really? A month? No.
And just to add to that and look at it from an even bigger picture, more impact to the fire service. Yep.
Yep.
It's also grand list, it's tax base, it's supporting the entire tax base for the town.
Right.
And when your entire tax base, 80% of the bill is the schools, they're paying into the school taxes without any impact on the schools. Traffic, sure, with busing and stuff like that, but as far as just dollars for the overall tax bill, it's a benefit to the tax base. And there's a whole lot more you can read into that, but just from a very large 40,000 foot view, yeah.
Great. Well, then let's carry on to slide this one. This just has some of the key kind of bottom line numbers, if you will. Do have a 73% increase in call volume since 2008. We've only increased population by 35%. You will notice, though, and I didn't put it here, though, we do have a 4% annual growth rate of employment. So you're absolutely right. The job growth is far exceeding our population growth, and that is definitely contributing to the increase in calls. But the nature of calls themselves are also changing dramatically. 60% of the calls now are EMS related as of 2023. And I will point out that this is actually slightly lower than our national average at 65% of calls being EMS related. So we're experiencing something that every other department in Vermont, every other department in the country are experiencing for the last at least 5 to 10 years. There's been a clear increase in EMS calls. And I think we've got a chart here to show some of the plotting themselves. So this table here shows the 70 to 30% breakdown of residential and non-residential based on the existing, the last 17 months of call data. That pattern is probably held pretty consistent based on what I've seen.
Would you extrapolate that 60% of that increase in call volume is from EMS alone, or is that?
60% of the calls are EMS related.
Do we know what percentage of that increase in call volume is for the EMS?
Well, let's go to the next slide here. Keep going, one more, this one. So get that chart on there. You can see that the actual total volume has gone up. This is from 2008. And then you can see the growth in the EMS, which is in that black line on the bottom. And you can see actually a slight dip, if not holding relatively stable at the fire calls. So clearly, I would agree with your statement that the majority of the increase is EMS related. In the report, there's some other kind of analyses, if you will, of slicing the data in different ways, but clearly there's a growth in the EMS demand.
Just one other point too about that is as the EMS calls go up, that places a great demand on the transport services, which makes the non-transport EMS services that the fire departments provide much more important. Many lives can be saved by that rapid response, even if you don't have an ambulance. So I just want to make sure that that's on the table too.
As well as the types of rescues. When you look at that and say that it's emergency medical related, that also includes if we have to do forcible entry to get to a patient, if we have to have multiple hands to help lift a patient, or if they're entangled in some way and we have to actually perform an extrication. So that is included in that emergency medical. It's not just about going to sick people at a house.
So like car accidents and stuff like that?
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, an important note, just to remind everyone, is that the numbers that we've analyzed here are only those calls that have been responded to. There have been instances where the call volume has exceeded the capability or the capacity to respond to every call. So in some cases, the demand might exceed these numbers that we're analyzing here. All right, let's continue on. The next slide is something that I think let's just move over because some of the more detailed analyses is just down below. This is something that this dives into some of those answers and some of the pieces that I was trying to draw out earlier with the land use. At this point in time, we're not recommending anything that really responds to this situation. There could be the possibility in the future that the impact fees could be designed to treat different land uses differently. In this case, we're treating all residential equally. You're a per person and you live in a house, you pay a fee. It doesn't matter whether you live in a multi-unit structure, or you live in a single family. But it is important as we start diving into how the station and how the future assets, that right now, if our land use continues to change and add a number of what's deemed commercial apartments, meaning more than 10 units in a building, it's going to change and continue to probably increase the demand on our fire department. So it's today's standards is held, then we might need a certain amount of space. But if our land use continues to intensify, that demand might increase.
And that's both from the fire side and the EMS side. Many times we get called to multifamily residents for burnt food, things like that on the fire side. So it's both.
And just to point out then in this table, just to know what you're looking at, is that the last column there, if you look down at the very bottom, that's the average of a calls per year per unit. This is based on the amount of residential units that we think we have right now in the town, nearly about 5,000. We divide that out by the number of calls by land use type. And so the commercial apartments, mobile homes, they're generating calls 3 to 4x the average call volume. And then if we were down in the detached, more traditional suburban single-family units, your call volume per unit is much lower. And so I think it stands to reason, without a lot of deduction, is that we've changed our land use mix. We've seen this increase in calls. There is some correlation there. All right, The next slide might address one of your other questions there, is that the non-residential, there's 3 general land use types that was in the grand list. The farm only had 1 call in that 17 months. Whether that's true or not, we're
I was just
analyzing the
picking.
data. But we've sliced it out by the number of employees, roughly 1,000 employees per parcel, or on a per parcel basis, or per 1,000 employees. And so different land uses generate different levels of call volume. It's hard to compare residential and non-residential, so that's why they're broken up. But again, at this point in time, we have no real forecast or confidence to know whether we're going, what the land use mix is changing. But if we add a lot more general commercial, it might increase our needs relative to maybe those industrial uses. But again, that's on a per parcel basis. You can see the industrial is much higher than a commercial, just they're larger, single, big building calls. So much like Chief Cole was mentioning, there's a different structure to their responses.
And even within the commercial building we're seeing, and I've talked to community development about how we're going to structure the fees, we're seeing there's a particular developer that likes to propose warehouses in Essex. And so they'll build a warehouse building with 1 door or 2 doors in it. And then within a short period of time, they come back with a consent agenda item to put some sort of manufacturing or business within that. So they didn't do it at the front where they know that we would review it. They're doing it after the fact. And so we have to be careful about structuring the fees to align with the actual use of the commercial property, not the fact that it's just a building.
Right. Well, let's move into the kind of the core of the issue here. Hopefully this background has been helpful. Not too many more slides, but just talking about where we are today, the current assets, we're just under 7,000 square feet, 6,800 square feet of the current station. We have 35 personnel. Now, that changes day to day, but mostly with paid on-call volunteers. So that's a per diem basis. You get responded. So nobody's living on site. Nobody's there. We do have some personnel traveling long distances and being there for the day. So that changes the nature of what they need in the station to be there all day. Currently, 6 vehicles are part of the assets that we have. Some of them will be replaced, and that's in your the annual budget. But the expectation is that those number of vehicles will grow in the future, particularly to respond to some of the changes of the demands, the land uses, specialized responses. There's general apparatus. The communication systems needs to be expanded. We also just have our breathing apparatus and other expansions. As the station grows, we need to add more apparatus, more PPE for everyone. Bottom line, it's undersized for what we currently do today. For what the department operates, the town is benefiting, and this department is operating out of a space that's not ideal, and it's undersized for their current operations. And so today, they need to change the way they operate, and a new station would allow the department to operate in the way that would be better served for the community. So the next slide here, there's a number of assets that are part of the impact fee study. On page 32 of the study, it lists those other assets. There's an aerial truck, there's some specialized response vehicles, there's some response apparatus for trails and natural areas of the town. There's also something for potential electric vehicle fires in garages, and so some of this is responding to the changing nature of our town. The biggest asset that the impact fee is looking to fund is this proposed new fire station. And when we kicked off this study, the North Main Street study had not started. The sale or that purchase of the land had not been finalized yet. So this study is very separate. We are guided by the previous plans that Wayman Lanphier had provided. We know that they're subject to change. It's a work in progress. There's other consultants hired to do this. But in order to do a fee estimate, we needed to get a number put into the plan. And so that is where we have the roughly $53 million, which includes financing, which we do believe is eligible for impact fee to be funded. It's the full suite of assets. And based on a financing estimate, which we discussed with the town, it would be somewhere of a bond for 30 years. It'd be roughly that $1.8 million of annual expenditures. Now, we expect also that the future station would exceed the needs of this impact fee period going out to 2050. This is a 75-year-plus building. That's the hope. That number is subject to change depending on how fast Essex grows, whether we intensify and add a bunch of 20-plus unit structures, whether we build industrial buildings. The demands on our fire department is going to change. And so inherently the amount we occupy that building will change its lifespan. So we need to put some numbers together on paper, and so all of the estimates here are based on the best information available when this study is written. And we're roughly saying that about $10 million of that new station would be eligible for impact fee funding by 2050. To be clear, there is additional capacity beyond 2050 that we expect a future impact fee. So if 10 years from now we say, yeah, there's clear confidence that growth is going to continue and that we can continue to assess impact fees beyond 2050, we will do so. But at this point, there's a horizon, if you will, of 2050 that we're not looking beyond. And we're only trying to fairly allocate the amount of that new station that the amount of new growth would utilize. So part of that new station is replacing existing capacity, part of it's addressing our current deficiencies, and then it's building for growth. And then out of that new growth, a portion of it is going to be used by those users by 2050. Then there'll be a portion of growth beyond that. Anything else to add to that definition?
What are the key aspects as you go through what John has proposed and what he said? Our current, if we were up to par with our current station at between 12 and 15,000 square feet, that does not include incorporating living space in it. That's just for what we have now and under the current model that we do for staffing without overnight quarters and what have you. So it's important to understand that the next phase, it would be important to make sure that we consider that so that the town has other options before we jump in both feet to, say, a full-time employment. We've talked about lots of different things, and there are a lot of different brainstorming things that we still can do to lead us up to the point where we have to go with a full-time fire department. So, again, I just wanted to make sure that everybody's clear on that delineation.
I'll go a little bit more, and then maybe Assistant Chief Richards would add more, but this station being proposed in the diagram that's on the screen behind you, you can see it has a number of spaces and rooms, etc. The square footage was the easiest way to show a legal need for additional space. There are things that I mentioned earlier in the presentation that's somewhat outside of that service standard, that clean square footage number. And that is the fact that our changing demands on our community. So if we continue to have more calls per capita, it's going to increase our needs. It's going to then put more strain on our current volunteers and the operational model that we have. And that's going to then necessitate a change to add beds, add full-time living amenities as we have paid full-time. I know the difference between full-time staff and paid per diems, but we're going to have people there in the station for longer periods of time. And so if we have the changing demographics, if we have fewer volunteers, we're going to have to create a station that meets the ability for the department to service. And so that's why at the end of the day, we have these two fee options. And so that's what the next slide after this is, that we have two fee options to consider. One that uses this approach that we didn't really talk today, but I call the plan-based. This is where you plan for a future that you expect to occur. And you then say, what does it cost to meet that future, to deliver that future? And then you back out how much does it cost per unit of growth. And that's our per capita or per employee. The option B, which is that the station It is that plan-based approach. It says this is what we need to meet the needs of the community into the future. The option A, this is a clear distinction. The option A is maintaining the status quo. We're going to get somewhere 75 to 100K, maybe a year, in option A. That's not going to allow us to pay for a new fire station. It's going to allow us to buy a couple vehicles and expand some things marginally, but it's not going to be the big shift. It's not going to be the big jump. So that's why there's a clear distinction between these two options, and that's where we have the conversation today. So the last two slides that I have is really, there's a preliminary fee estimate that some of the, that's where I'll end today. I have the last slide as kind of an organization slide, is to kind of guide us in a public conversation. We can talk about answering any questions you might have on the fee structure itself, and where do we go from here to implement this. But you have the impact fee plan itself. Happy to take any questions there or anything that we covered here. But before I leave the floor, Assistant Chief Richards, is there anything more on the station piece that you'd like to add?
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind with this, and again, it was, how do we come up with a basis of calculation? You have to start someplace. So we chose to start with the plan that we had in place that we were examining at the time, which is our worst case scenario. There's nothing saying that moving forward, you're not doing this in phases. So that will have a significant impact as well. All of the changes in our community will inform how we're going to set the calculation of these impact fees. That could be your mandate on what services we provide. You could turn around and say, we're not providing these kinds of services anymore. Not advisable, but it's an option. Again, to what Assistant Chief Treadholm alluded towards, is that we're trying to create a strategy over a long period of time to get the stepping stones in place before having to pull that trigger of saying, oh my God, we need full-time at $4 million of operational budget a year. And oh, by the way, you need a full station in order to have that. So we're trying to get a strategy together for the long term on how we can pay for these incremental pieces that we choose to grab and pull off. Whether it's the full station, some subset of that full station, housing per diem staff versus housing full-time, so on and so forth. I just wanted to make that clear that although the study shows that we're using a footprint of roughly 44,000 square foot, that's the footprint that we had to deal with at the time. That's the ideal. There's phases in between there, between where we are today and that.
Kendall.
Let's just say, can I ask the town manager a potentially related, unrelated question?
Sure.
The fire department on the Stantec plans, is that a 44,000 square foot building?
Tom is probably more familiar with it than I am, but it's about the same. It's not exactly the same. It's in the same
It's
ballpark.
comparable at least.
Yes.
It's, okay.
Yep.
Right, there's a reason for that. Again, it goes back to think about the purpose of that project.
Yeah.
Up there, the purpose of that project at this phase is to plan out the possibility of what we can do with that project. So, worst case scenario, if we're planning for a 75-year building, I'm just going to average 75-year building, what kind of space will that need? We'll need X. We need this amount of parking. We need this amount of green space, this amount of sidewalk, so on and so forth. This amount of space for a footprint for a building. Does not say that we're going to build that tomorrow. It just says in order to properly space plan that site, here's what you need for potentially 75 years out, what you're going to need for space. You may use a fraction of that tomorrow. Same thing with any other building that's sitting out there. Library, 27,000 square feet, same thing. You may not build that tomorrow,
Yeah.
but you've got a plan in this phase for the worst case scenario, because the worst thing that you could do is to build everything in a very dense format, then actually build buildings, and then find out you need to expand those buildings and not have any place to expand them to.
Yeah. No, I only asked the question because you had originally said that it didn't take into account the 80 and 90 Main Street. So I wanted to make sure that that was the size building that was comparable.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other you get more?
I have one more question.
Go ahead.
The impact fee, you can't capture any of the previous costs from the people that have paid for in advance. I'm not saying that correctly, but like the folks have already paid for fire services, capital costs and stuff. None of that can be recouped through an impact fee? To pay them, to quote, pay them back for some of their investment?
Help me out.
I think that's where the revenue credits are gonna come in, Ken, because basically I guess the best example is if you have an existing plot of land and you've been paying taxes on it for 5 years, you will get credits against your impact fee when you decide to build on that.
Okay.
Yeah, so if we were to accept the impact fee today and somebody gets charged an impact fee, so today there's no impact fee for this. So in terms of anybody's contribution, it's on the annualized property tax basis right now. And so that's where all the investment has been. There's no allowance or no credit, so to speak, for what currently has been funded, what's been operational. So you as a residential taxpayer, you've paid your fair share, you're getting what we have today. If an impact fee payer pays tomorrow, they're going to be paying property taxes as well as paying an impact fee. That is what the credit methodology is there, so you don't get double charged. Because we know that that same person is going to contribute a few cents per dollar that will go toward the fire station, but they're also paying a lump sum that goes toward that fire station.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Another example too, Kendall, is if somebody has a current existing home and they want to add an accessory apartment or convert it, that will be a different fee, less fee than if it's a brand new bare lot that they're digging a hole in the ground and building a full building on.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else, Kendall?
Yeah, thank you.
You all set?
So I
Don?
have to ask a stupid question. Who pays the impact fee? The person building or the person that moved into the new house?
The person getting the building permit.
Okay, so,
Which may get passed on to whoever, if somebody purchases the property.
okay, I didn't know how, okay, thank you. Sorry, I didn't understand that. Thank you.
Ethan?
I just got one more question about at the end table there for the impact fees, because I'm curious and I gotta ask. But so for let's just
Or the presentation.
the base impact fee option.
Yep.
That one. So my question is the non-residential, that includes the commercial and everything else. So what like for I'm talking any agriculture, not just animal husbandry, but for agriculture, you're gonna figure that on per employee.
Most likely on an agricultural basis, that per 1,000 square feet is based on the Chittenden County average of around 580 square feet per employee, which it very clearly, Performance Foods has a very different footprint than a retail
Right.
outlet in the Essex experience. So
Well-
this really relies on how the impact fee is to be administered. And if you have a permit that comes in, sometimes they just give you the square footage and you have to make that judgment call. Sometimes they have how many folks they have planned to work there, then you might do the per job.
Okay.
So hopefully it nets out that you get things right over the average, but you don't have enough specificity in every land use case to have that dialed in.
Okay. Because my
Ethan,
altering comment was going to be that agriculture doesn't have a permit requirement in the town of Essex. You don't have to file for a permit in the town of Essex to build a farm.
To
Right.
build
Tomorrow.
to build a-
Correct.
and the impact fee is based on the building of a structure too. So a very large farm may have very much fewer buildings than Performance Foods, for instance, as a square footage. But again, when the ordinance is written, that may be something that is to be considered. The town does also have the legal right to waive impact fees in certain cases. Not advisable, but it can. So that's also an option that's there, that would be written in the ordinance as well.
Okay.
Anything else? I got a couple questions then. So I guess I'm trying to understand how logistically how this works. So we'll send you off. You come back with a request for us to go through the ordinance process. At some point, the ordinance gets approved, and then beyond any permit that's applied for or issued, I guess that gets figured out where the start point is for collecting those fees. Oh, that's a weird picture. Maybe I should turn my camera off. But then, in the meantime, we're considering what we're going to do with the property up there, and potentially considering putting a fire station up there, and we go forward with a bond vote, and we get all set up to do that. How does the money get used once it's collected?
Once we have an ordinance with a final fee schedule, because there'll have to be an actual dollar that somebody might have to be assessed at the building permit phase, then the ordinance would stipulate what the fee would be at the building permit phase based on the number of bedrooms, which is the proposal. Once that ordinance has been accepted, you can decide if it's a July 1st, then the impact fee. So let's assume you have the fee schedule, 100%, day one starts getting collected. You have a legal obligation to expend those dollars within 6 years of collection. And so you have to fund something close to those assets that you specify that you're going to fund with those impact fees. Now, what I say close is that there's case law that allows you some flexibility, because the plan for the station may change. Let's say the bond vote changes the footprint of it, and it needs to be slightly shrunk a little bit because of the costs that have gone up. As long as you deliver a station that meets your future needs, then that fits the bill. So you have some flexibility as to the actual assets that are being funded, as long as they meet the intention of what the impact fee is delivering, because we need to show that the payees benefit from their fee.
Okay, so that 9.9 million that you had in the slide there is the estimate of the amount of a $53 million purchase that is the
Over
part that
26 years.
you could collect fees for. But if you've already established the bond and you already have a payment, the town has a payment plan that's, it's being paid by property taxes for the most part, and then you collect impact fees after that, how do they reduce the amount that the town has to collect, has to pay, or into that?
Yeah, the way I would advise is that ideally you would walk in, so if tomorrow you have the bond vote and you now have an annual payment on the bond, I would recommend that you try to zero out that revenue expectation from impact fees for the first year.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what the level of growth might be, whatever other contingencies and unknowns. The next year, we've collected a couple $100,000. It will then, you pay yourself back from a town budgeting perspective. You put that into the capital fee, impact fee revenue, and then you show in your capital budget, move from impact fee fund to general fund, or to reduce bond payment principal or interest. And then simply then the interest payment that you're going to pay next year will be reduced. So you're basically a year behind any impact fee revenues that you can
Okay.
collect. So that's the way you would basically be paying back yourself if the bond vote were to precede the impact fees.
So that number could vary wildly depending on how development goes.
That's
Okay.
right.
Okay. Okay.
That is the uncertainty of impact fees. The other is the legal, the side of it that new growth pays for things.
All right. Any other board member questions?
Go ahead, Ethan.
Oh, that's fresh in my brain, but you were mentioning that you could phase those new requirements. So, like, if, let's just say we would need the 45,000 square foot building, we plan everything for that, but we bond and pay for 30,000 square feet with the potential of the addition in a second phase, or you would have to go full in on the 45,000 square feet. Like, could you say, let's just use random number, $30 million for 30,000 square feet, but we're going to call it phase one of the bond, and then we could bond for phase two for another 15,000 two-story living quarters with a pole in the middle.
As long as that original phase one, 30,000 square feet accomplishes what
Your mission.
needs are in the impact fee, then you may proceed and continue to offset it with that potential 9.9 million. And then as you get further down the road in years to come and the needs of the community change, you will have to reevaluate your impact fees and adjust accordingly. And then those fees will then change accordingly because you'll have new needs that aren't funded, and that all of those calculations will need to be revisited.
And how long? I know you said that the plan for the fire station is 75 years, but as a professional, how long do you expect this study to be active in Essex? 10, 15 years?
The plan has been designed based on the forecast growth, land use change out to 2050. So 26, 25-year horizon from now. What I would recommend is every 5 years you look, Manager Duggan would look at the growth. Boy, we're well below or we're well exceeding the growth that was forecast here. If you're relatively on target, might have a conversation, say, has your capital needs changed, fire department? And if they say, no, this is generally we're keeping on line in 5 years from now, continue on. If the growth were vastly different than what was forecast and used in this plan, then I would recommend coming back to the table and saying, are we going to exceed our by 2050, are we going to blow past this need and consume much more of that station than we anticipated? Are we going to need more trucks? Are we going to need more assets? So that's what can happen. So we're forecasting out to 2050. There's no statute, there's no requirement in Vermont to revisit it at a particular time period or interval. So I would recommend, at least given the amount of growth that we've had, 5 years is probably fair for you to just look at the demographics. That's your first indication whether it's still a valid study.
Okay. So if you bonded, let's just say this happened next year, you bonded for the fire station and all that happened, and you went on a reduced plan, phase one, let's just say we used that 30 million for the 30,000 square feet, and then in 5 years you realize that the town grew 25% more than you had expected. Does that throw off the whole plan and the bond and the impact fee, or you can just simply raise the impact fees, but your station new phase two growth would also be larger?
What would happen initially is that if we had a calculation that was $30 million divided by the growth that we expected by 2050, so let's make that the assumption. If the growth happened a lot faster, you'd get the revenue faster, and you'd simply pay off your bond that much faster. So that's probably a best case scenario if you had a bond to have more growth faster. If you have growth slower than we forecast, then we still have the bond payment annually, but we're not getting the impact fee revenue. The reality on the ground is that if we grow faster than what we forecast, we're going to consume that space, that station space, sooner. We're going to need to plan for that expansion sooner than we expected.
So it'd be good to pay it off, but bad because we'd be running out of station again.
Our current station is 50 years old,
Right.
and we've added on to it twice.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to kind of understand how the next 5 years looks if things progressed. It's unknown, like everything else.
Kendall?
So if I understand that correctly, you would reassess your impact fee about every 5 years as your recommendation?
Correct.
The other question I have is kind of relevant, is are these costs comparable to similar communities as far as impact fees?
I knew that question was going to come up, and unfortunately, I'm not prepared for that one. I owe you that one.
No problem.
I don't know. I know that the city of Burlington's considering theirs. I don't know if they're going to, they might keep it fixed as of today, might even decline it, decrease it. I've heard that other communities are looking at theirs. The town of Heinsberg is reviewing theirs. So the reality of anybody revisits theirs, particularly the surrounding communities of probably anybody but Burlington, there's probably going to be an increase, and it's probably going to be a reasonable, a similar value if they update their impact fee.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's a number we can choose at the time of setting the ordinance. You said we could adjust it however.
Correct.
Within bounds. You said there's
You have a legal
limit.
maximum. You
Yeah.
can't go exceeding that number.
Right.
But you can decrease
Anything
it.
up
But
to
the
it.
impact is that the property tax would
Yep.
take the burden
Yep.
to pay for the additional capacity. And then, as Assistant Chief Trendholm said, there is you have the legal ability to waive any particular application from impact fees. Just knowing that then your revenue decreases for that year.
Right. Okay, any other board member questions?
I have a question.
Karen, go
Actually, I
ahead.
have two questions. Thank you for this information. So I'm learning a lot about fire and your work. The point about phasing, Tom, was really important. I'd like to think about the other scenario where the select board and community decide we'd rather build for the 75 year. It's never going to be cheaper to build. That's the direction we want to go. If you have a 30-year bond that you've paid off by 2055, but you still have a useful life of 20 years of that facility, how would you recoup the payments that were made by taxpayers to cover the bond that would have been appropriate for impact fees in that window? If you have anything you could share on that, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, that's a method called buy-in, and you can assess any new growth for the remaining capacity at that time.
Okay.
So at the time that the bond were fully paid off, you'd probably come back and say, we know there's the annual, or we know there's this much space. It cost X amount of square foot. If you could do it of two ways. You could decide how much would it cost today at that point in time to replace and build that same square footage. That's the replacement cost value at that time. And you allow the future growth to pay back the community for what you had previously paid. Alternatively, you can simply say, what was that value that we paid back in $2,025? And say in 2050, if there's still growth, then you still allow new growth to pay for their level of consumption of that available space. Mm-hmm. So it's a buy-in. It's what some communities do a lot in water systems. You build a lot of linear miles of water systems, not using it for many, many years. Mm-hmm. And so you've prepaid that, and then new users are paying for their share of that capacity over the time until that capacity is exhausted.
Okay, thank you. And the second question I have is, I'm wondering if there's any precedent for a type of credit like you've outlined here. The chief mentioned there's sometimes specialized equipment for commercial properties, chemicals, other things they might need. Has there ever been a situation you're aware of where a property owner agrees to provide that on site for a discount in this fee or some similar type of sharing in the burden of supplying the outfit?
Yeah, it would be an infrastructure credit, which I think I alluded to in the report, but we basically said it's not typical in a fire response. But absolutely, if let's say the Development Review Board or as part of any type of special development permit and some agreement with the fire department that said, this will be the better way to treat it, you can use it as a Development Review Board type of condition of their land use permit. Okay. And simply you could then say, if that satisfies the fire protection, or if it mitigates the increase that they would add to the department, there has to be some kind of recognition that it's necessary and that it meets their needs. Mm-hmm. You would look at probably what their impact fee burden would be, and then what the value of that infrastructure asset would be, and you would discount their impact fee liability. You would waive their impact fee liability. Sometimes there's been precedent that if a private land developer were to purchase an aerial vehicle, an aerial truck, it probably more than benefits their own development. There could be development agreements that they could actually collect impact fees through the town to help pay them back. Mm. So there's a lot of flexibility with those type of arrangements.
Thank you. I know that'd take a lot of collaboration to make sure it's not a different setup in every building and that meets the needs of the department. I was just interested in that. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to open up to the public. I don't see anybody in the room. Anybody have any comments or questions from the public? I don't see any hands going up, so are we ready to make a motion?
Go ahead.
I make the motion that the select board approve the fire department impact fee study and authorize staff to begin crafting an ordinance to implement the impact fees for the fire department.
Second.
Thank you, Ethan. Thank you, Don. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Motion passes 4-0. Thank you so much for the work. And,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
yeah.
It made me chuckle as one of the few people that saw the very first building, very first fire department. And we thought that was wonderful then. I was there.
All right, let's move on to business item 6B, work session continued on fiscal year 2026 budget. So there were some changes that were shared with us. Do we want to go through those first?
Yeah, I can go through those first. Good evening, everyone.
Good night.
So since our last encounter a couple weeks ago, we've had some improved information in our budget process, and it's resulted in 3 major changes in our budget. One is for our estimate of insurance costs, as we've gotten some quotes related to our insurance coverage that is significantly reducing our budget in that area. We have tacked back on the assessing revenue from our anticipated agreement with the city to extend that service for another year. And we made adjustments within our building structures for the utility bills related there. Obviously, those have an impact on our health and human service 1% line items as well. So that has taken our budget down to a 6.27% tax rate increase from fiscal 25 to potentially fiscal year 26, with a 5.2% change in our total budget expenses at this point. Obviously, we still have a lot of issues and things to discuss, so it's a very fluid process here, and I guess at this time we can open the table to those further discussions.
The other thing to be clear on, I guess, is there's a possibility of an increase in
Personnel.
the healthcare
Yeah.
costs for our employees, and it's expected another 35,000 increase there on that order.
Yeah, we're expecting a $35,000 increase once the numbers get updated within our budgeting system. So that would result in about a third of a percent
Right,
tax
it would-
increase.
It would go up to about 6.6%.
About
or so.
6.6, yep.
Yeah, okay. All right. So so that's a fairly significant change from our last discussion at 8.13. Anybody have any thoughts on whether we want to go lower than that?
I
I suspect so. Okay. So, just trying to figure out how to do this in an orderly fashion. And Greg and I were talking and wondering whether we should go through it department by department so that we're not jumping back and forth in the book.
Well, can I ask a question about what Dan's already putting in? So, to make sure I understand this, so you're recommending that the amount of money you're giving to Green Mountain Transit stays the same and not increase what they asked for? Is that what this means?
Correct, yes.
Sorry.
At this point, it's at the
Okay.
same budget level as fiscal year 25, level funding.
Yeah, if I can elaborate on that a little bit.
This part still confuses me. I'm sorry.
No, and it's tricky, and it's different. It's out of the ordinary. Typically, you see a 3, 4, 5% increase from Green Mountain Transit. This year, it's a lot more than that.
All right.
Meeting with them early last week, they're kind of budgeting based on the best case scenario that the legislature comes through, provides some additional funding, and they keep all services intact. So their $92,000 request, $93,000 request, is with that expected to happen. That said, I'm not sure that there's a high degree of confidence that that will happen. Certainly from me. Green Mountain Transit is being optimistic, but they told me they can't predict the future, so they don't know. They should know more come May or June once the legislature has made its decision. And based on the legislature's decision, they will either keep service intact or they have to make cuts.
Yeah.
They have the whole methodology about how they would apply service rates and fees and based on the service levels across all their member municipalities. In the case of Essex, what they've proposed thus far is drastic reduction of service in Essex. There's talk about extending one of the bus lines up to the Essex Experience from Five Corners, so eliminating that route that goes all the way down around Sand Hill. But even just going up to the Experience would be a pretty significant reduction. Was told verbally, and not don't have a formal proposal, but that
Right.
if Essex sees the drastic reductions, the legislature doesn't come through, there are major service cuts in Essex, then our dues would be adjusted downwards. Whether or not that happens, I don't know either. But so the recommendation right now is that we level fund at that $72,000. If the best case scenario comes to pass as far as service levels and we get assessed the 92,000 and we're paying for the 92,000 and getting those services, we think we can come up with the money, whether it's taking money out of the fund balance and the undesignated reserve, or if there's savings elsewhere in the budget at the end of the year to make up the difference. But it might still come to pass that we're assessed the $92,000 and we have to pay it. But based on that uncertainty and out of the interest in keeping the tax rate as manageable as possible, and the recommendation is to keep it at the $71,000.
Are there other questions about the changes here?
It's the same thing about Green Mountain Transit. Are we still planning on giving them a notice of pulling out of that? Because we have to give them a full year, right?
We would be on the hook for,
We would have until our last meeting, our second meeting in June, I think,
To do that.
to do that and have it be effective in FY27.
right. So we have to, we're going to be paying the fiscal 26 dues no matter what.
Right. If we did that, though, we would then be prepared if they did eliminate service in Essex. So we wouldn't have to, we'd have to fund it next year, this budget, but
Right.
not the following budget, right?
We would hopefully know what their service levels look like by late June, enough to make a decision as to whether or not we wanted to continue with Green Mountain.
Yeah,
Transit.
I only mention this because then if we do that, we're prepared if they do eliminate service in Essex. 'Cause I'm in favor of no service in Essex, no funding from Essex. That's my reasoning.
I don't, no, I agree with you. I think it's just a question of, if there's no service in Essex in fiscal 26 and we're still charged $92,000, we're going to have to pay it.
Right, but if we've given them notice by that June deadline, at least
Right.
then we're prepared.
And I think if they come back and say, we're going to cut 90% of your service and still charge you $92,000, then we're probably going to
Yeah.
talk about leaving.
And if they came back after that and said we are going to restore the full thing, we could still rescind our pulling out, right? I mean,
I'd have to
once we've
listen
sent
to
the
that some
notice,
more.
we could take that back? Just a question.
Yeah, that would have to be investigated. I would imagine that they would want us back, but I don't know that.
Yeah.
I don't know how it all works, yeah, or that whether the language allows that. Whether you can rescind a departure within the year that you have to remain in. I don't know.
Yeah. That was all. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions on the changes?
Yeah, I just had a question about I understand that the benefits, your open enrollment's finished and you pretty much got that dialed in, but when it says that there was you recommend against any changes to personnel and benefits budget lines, is that personnel like salaries budget line?
No,
Think
basically,
you got that
it-
nailed down, or?
it's kind of all of it. It's basically at a certain point we have to move ahead with the best plan that we have, and personnel changes throughout the year. So I'd say by December 16th, people will have done open enrollment. We'll have a pretty good sense of who's here now, and hopefully most of those people will be here a year from now, and we can have a pretty good sense of what the salaries and benefits are going to cost us in the budget. That said, somebody can leave at any time. We have to fill that position, somebody comes in and somebody takes our family benefits as opposed to the single person who left, or the other way around. So it's kind of, budgeting it's never going to be exact. We're never going to have the exact number, and at a certain point we just have to move forward with what we think is the best projection that we have. And I'm confident in saying that by the middle of this month we'll have the salary and benefits items in there as well as we can project them, and let's stop tinkering and move ahead. So that's what the reasoning is behind that.
So has there been any changes to those since the last meeting,
Yes.
other than increasing on the insurance?
Well, there, yeah, so the
Have you
increase,
lowered any of
the
the-
insurance will
any
be
of the-
changed. We're trying to hire a park superintendent right now. That will be a change from what's budgeted, most likely. We have a trails coordinator that we're advertising for right now, so that probably won't be hired by December 16th, but changes will come.
Okay, so short answer is no, you don't feel that there's any more savings to be in overspending in the salary line item.
I can't project with confidence that there's gonna be any significant changes one way or the other after December 16th. There will be changes, I can almost guarantee you that.
Well, I know there will be, we all know there will be changes. I'm just curious that you're saying right now that on all of the salary line items that you project to fill all of those positions for the full amount for every year that you put in that budget, and there's no movement that staff recommends.
No, so for an example, we might hire somebody on, let's say, take a step back. Let's say your last budget day is January 27th. I forget the exact Monday that is, before you have to warn the budget and send it to voters. By January 20th, we might have hired a position or two, and that number is going to be a little bit different from whatever we have in the budget for that position that's in there right now. If you want, we can take it back to you and adjust it, and it's probably going to be a few percentage points or a few $1,000s one way or the other. If you want to get that dialed in, we can do that. We can keep tweaking and adjusting. Or we can say this, the projection on December 16th is going to be pretty close to accurate, and you live with that. If you want to be more accurate a month from now, we can do that too. It's a question of how long do you want to tinker before you send it to vote.
Yeah, I was just curious if we looked at all of the, I know we don't have the audit yet, but we have a clear understanding of where we're at, right? And we have carryover this year.
Yeah, we
Substantial carryover that there's no number yet because the audit hasn't happened, but we know that it's there.
Yeah, there could be some carryover in the general fund. Yes.
And my concern is that we are budgeting the same way that we did last year, under the expectation that we're going to fill these positions. But we don't know that we have this carryover because we're just saying that we haven't seen the audit yet, which we haven't. But we know that we haven't filled those positions for majority of the year. I'd say larger than 75% on most of the positions that have been open.
Okay. Well, is that because we can't find the right people to hire, or?
I don't know. Is that because of there could be a whole list of things, but I don't.
Yeah.
Why isn't my concern when it comes to the budget? My concern to the budget is that we don't have a clear number on how much money is going to be carried over this year, just from the salary line item. I'm only talking salary line items right now. Not benefits, just salary line item. So if that number is $200,000, and we plan to budget the same way this year, and maybe we fill them all, maybe we don't. There's potential that over allowance could be $400,000. I'm not saying that $200,000 is a number that I know. I'm just saying that if that number is, which I personally believe it to be larger than that from the calculations I've made, but I just wanted you to ask the question, are you certain with those numbers? And that's where we're going to go with it. Because then it's going to become a decision making from the board of, okay, is there a consensus? Is there 3 people who want to save $200,000 that we spent last year that's going to go directly into the fund balance, and we're going to do the same thing again this year? That was going to be my question. I saw the response about the police staffing and allowance, and it seemed to be that we had helped ourselves a little bit because of overspending in dispatch. You mentioned admin, police building. It all helped reduce the amount that we owed the city, right? But the fact that we're giving them a credit, and then those deficiencies are crossing over to cover them, was really concerning to me. I'd like to see that be a little bit more clear on, okay, this is the item Y, not just, it says areas where the budget was overspent, and then it goes on to list all the things. It doesn't give an amount on each one of those things. It doesn't say that police dispatch cost us $10,000, and we had $400,000 in salaries, you know, that were left over in it. I appreciated the rundown of it, but it's not clear where those deficiencies are coming from. You know what I mean? And I'm talking just police department, and
Yeah.
in your response to my comment on 1118.
Ethan, did you see the spreadsheet? It's called Evaluating Police Salaries Benefits Spreadsheet. And it's, I thought I had set it up in the
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is,
sideways. But that,
Yeah.
I think, does get into the department by department
Yeah,
within
it
police.
does,
It has
it does.
dispatch, it has admin, it has patrol, and it
Yeah,
shows where the spending has landed for each of those departments.
Right. So every one of those numbers I just take and multiply by 0.52 to get the town portion.
no. Well, I guess yes. This expense summary
Is total.
captures the total expenses within, yes,
Okay.
within the salary and benefits for the police. So if I'm looking at
I'll have to break that down then.
if I'm looking at page 88 of the packet, and I'm looking at 2024 budget versus actual for the total police department as a whole, you know, there's $4.63 million that was budgeted, and there's $4.667 million that was spent. So we were overspent by $37,000 for the whole police department in fiscal 24. So that was with 10% allowance for vacancies in patrol and dispatch in that year. I know that in previous years, you know, going back 5 years, fiscal 20 through 22, there was underspending because we hadn't developed those allowances yet.
Right.
And, you know, they were first implemented in fiscal year 23, and it's allowed us to kind of capture that history and to fully reflect what a full police force would look like, but also understanding that we and surrounding communities have challenges in getting police forces to full capacity.
Okay.
So is the information there that you're looking for? You can look at that out.
Yeah, I'll
Come-
break
come-
it all
come
down,
back-
and bring
come back
it
with it.
for the next
Yeah.
meeting,
And
and then we could see what it is from town and village. But I don't know if I'm misrepresenting what I'm trying to say, but those direct budget impacts in that police budget
Mm-hmm.
are not from the 6 employees that were underfunded.
The 6 employees is just looking at our present situation, fiscal year 25, that we're short right now,
Right.
that many patrol people. You know, fiscal year 25's budget obviously has a 10% patrol rate. So if I'm kind of insinuating from your discussion here, yeah, we will probably be underspent in patrol right now because we're going to go through half a fiscal year with less people, with less personnel. But at the same time, we also had retirements in fiscal year 25, and those expenses also go through those salary line items. So there's also an impact there when people are leaving and getting their retirement payouts, vacation payouts, as you will. So, you know, that will help to offset that underspending to some degree as well. I mean, I know generally it's been a concern of yours that we're underspending in our salary benefit line items, and it's disproportionately adding to our fund balance at the end of the year, at the end of any
Right.
audit year. Just kind of looking back at it's not perfect, but it's,
But that's with 363,000 in underfund.
well, that's true. That's including the allowance, because that's part of the budget number.
Okay.
but I'm also looking at the group insurance number. If I pluck out the group insurance line item here, $1.92 million budget fiscal 24. 1.65 million is the actual spending on group insurance. And if I look at regular salaries, 5.77 actual versus 5.56 budget. So we're overspent on salaries. The part-time salaries are right on, 865,000. Overtime, 357,000 budgeted, 347,000 actual. So in terms of salaries, we're kind of in a good spot for fiscal 24. And we really found the biggest difference in the group insurance line item because of our portfolio of employees changed, you know, and it's a big driver there. So I think, you know, I'm just trying to.
You're confident.
What's that?
That my original question was, do you have confidence in?
Well, I mean,
numbers
we
that we
are
have,
we are
you know?
planning personnel for what we expect to execute, what we expect to need to provide the services that we want to provide. You know, the benefit line is just individual adjustments for the 35,000 for fiscal 26. You know, that kind of changes with the wind and changes with the people coming in and out the door and what choices they make individually. But we do want to, you know, staff these positions. At the end of the day, that's what we want to do. And we want to staff our patrol positions in police, but our experience just isn't there yet. So, you know, and that's why we keep this 10% allowance in that area.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And related to the question about fund balance numbers, is there expectation that by our next meeting we'll have something to work with?
Yeah, I expect that we'll have a draft from the auditors hopefully later this week. We were talking a little bit about things today. So I think we'll be in position for that. Hopefully we can discuss a little bit of fund balance assignments at that time too, and where those things might lie. Yep.
Okay, so we can get a feel for what the audit is saying for this year. We'll know what the number is next meeting. So
I have some questions, and it's either Greg or Dan, and it's it's kind of morbid. So if people buy a cemetery plot, and they pay the $3,000 or whatever it is the charge is, where does that money go, and why doesn't it go back into the cemetery commission to do everything they've asked to do?
It kind of does. It goes into, we have a separate cemetery fund.
Okay.
It goes into that.
Okay.
We generally try to treat that as more of a capital fund, and so if there's big improvements, they've drawn from that to do you know, major turf improvements. That's something that would help improve the mausoleum, doing those types of things. The money that's in there for the cemetery commission that's proposed in the operating fund, that's more of your year-to-year, day-to-day maintenance, mowing, upkeep, stuff like that.
Okay, because this is saying stone repair and well, now I've lost it here, but anyway. Well, the placards were free, so I don't need to worry about that one. But gravestone repair, tree care, and maintenance usually comes out of, in most cemeteries, what you pay for your plot. So I was just curious how that worked. Okay. My second question is, how come there's no rental for the Harriet Powell Museum?
Where are you looking exactly?
I didn't see, it said that we maintain the Harriet Powell Museum building under the building report, but I don't see any income from rent.
Right, yeah, we have not charged rent for that. That's where the Historical Society operates out of there. We've not charged rent for that.
Okay, is there a reason?
Not that I know of.
I mean, if we're paying all this maintenance, I would assume there should be some reimbursement of some type.
My best guess, I don't know this for certain, is that we've looked at the Historical Society as a community good and a community benefit. I don't believe they really generate much, if any, revenue. We actually give them $4,000 or so a year to help them with their expenses. So I think if we were charging them rent, we would probably see their request going up by the same amount, would be my guess.
Okay. My next question is the contracted animal control officer. When that proposed budget was submitted, was there a breakdown of what that money goes to, with like salaries, dogs, food, insurance? Was there any breakdown for that amount?
So that's a contract out.
Right.
It's no longer a salaried position.
Only because it's a.
We probably have to check with the police department to get.
Okay, I didn't know if that was included in his request or not, because we don't see that part of it anyway. I'm just concerned because that's a lot of money to pay for somebody to be the dog catcher. Sorry.
Yeah, no,
and if you ask around to other towns, it's like what they pay their dog catcher is not anywhere near that amount. So.
Yeah, let me, we can get back to you on that one.
Okay.
So I'm just making.
I'm sorry, I should have had that one ready before and I didn't catch it.
I'm gonna try to pull up Questica and see if it's in there, but yeah, it's not cheap. I think if you remember, Chief Hoig said that they'd actually requested an even bigger increase this year. He pushed back and I think asked them to spread it out over a few years. We have tried a few things over the years. We've tried doing it in-house. We've used a retired police officer who did it for a couple of years.
Right.
There's been turnover. This company has at least been consistent. Yeah, we'd like to keep it within check as far as what their annual increases are.
Okay.
But I'll have to get back to you as far as the actual
That's
breakdown for that.
Thank you.
It looks like we're going by member rather than by department.
Sorry. We can
It's
go by
okay.
department
No,
if
it's
it's
okay.
easier.
I don't know. Do we have a preference?
No.
Probably whatever's easiest for Dan to keep up.
So I guess then, starting with revenue, anybody have any revenue comments or questions or suggestions?
Yeah, in regards to the Prairie Field, are we turning that back to the school, so we'll cut down on our maintenance on that? Thank you.
Yeah, I guess the lacrosse went independent, right?
Yeah.
Question I have, or something to consider, is we have 250,000 for fund balance use, and we have 575 of capital transfers in this budget.
Yes.
Sounds right.
And so my question is, would it make sense to, instead of putting 250,000 in as a fund balance to buy down the tax rate, we just simply transfer, well, not simply, we choose to reallocate that 250,000 to capital and then reduce the capital transfers by an equal amount? That saves the 1% human services, saves $2,500 if we just move that money directly from fund balance to capital rather than running it through the operating budget.
What table are you on, Andy? Revenue?
Revenue's on page 12.
First pass that makes sense to me, but I'll look to Dan and we might want to just double check that. But I think that
Yeah.
It
does
has the
ma-
same net effect on the tax
Right.
rate.
I mean,
But
we're
it makes
talking
it potentially
reduce
less
something to
transparent. That's the
325K.
thing.
Yep.
Hmm.
And yeah, if we're kind of bypassing one going in and going out, I think there's some logic to that where it could help us reduce that health and human service impact as well. So I think
Right, because
I think
anything
that's
that
a-
goes through the budget has a 1% bogey on it for the human services.
Yeah.
Which I don't really want to decrease, but,
right. Yeah.
yeah.
But just in the bigger picture of things,
Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I do think that that's reasonable to consider. Just trying to think if we would have to change the capital outward to 325, and I guess it would have to be maybe a suggestion outside of, maybe it be a fund balance assignment rather than, I'm just trying to think how it
Right,
might
since
work.
we've already in a previous last year, or the year before, whenever it was, we
Yeah.
already designated this
Mhm.
for
For future use, yep.
future taxpayer relief. We'd have to reallocate it, I think, to a capital transfer,
Mm-hmm.
and then take an equal
then
amount
reduce
out of the transfer.
Exactly.
We have to figure find the right place to do it. You probably don't want it on the police because you still want the city to pay their share, right? So it would be
Right.
fire or
Yeah, it could be
someplace.
fire, it could be PW equipment,
Right.
one of those two, yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And then it's just, again, it avoids the $2,500.
And how will that impact the human services?
It would reduce it by 2,500 because we would be expensing $250,000 less because our capital transfers would be reduced by that much.
Okay.
While we're on the topic of human services, before I forget, did you speak to that when I was out?
No, I didn't.
Okay. So we're gonna have more information for you at the next meeting, but we're getting the legal opinion that Kendall has brought up before, that the human services money, we should be voting on it, asking voters to vote on it separately. So it would still be the 1%, but instead of being wrapped into the budget, it would be a separate question. So there'd be a question of, shall the voters approve a budget of X number of dollars? Shall the voters approve human services funding equivalent to 1% of the budget? So it'll be reflected a different way. If the vote is approved, it would have no net effect on the budget and the tax rate, but it is just a different way we've been doing things. So I just wanted to point that out, and we'll have more information for you going next week, or 2 weeks from now.
So the thought is that the floor vote that happened many years ago doesn't carry forward every year, or?
Kind of, and I have to dig into, and this is where we'll have more information for
Yeah,
you for
yeah,
next week.
okay, okay.
I think there's enough gray area, and there's been some precedents, I believe it's been since then, that it should be called out and highlighted specifically versus being wrapped into the budget.
Okay, we've always interpreted our charter to say we vote on one number, though.
We have.
So, all right. All right. All right, any other revenue?
Well, I would note that I thought we had to amend the fund balance policy in order to transfer fund balance directly to capital.
No, we don't, because it's only, we have to return undesignated fund balance beyond 50%. If we designate it, it's designated, and we can send it anywhere we want.
Yeah,
You could- you
and
could-
la-
you could-
la-
Not recommended, but you can. Right.
Sure, is there,
Huh?
you have a question or a concern? I mean, I don't want to
No.
miss anything if you're,
No.
okay. Any other revenue? All right, then the next section is town administration, page 16. And there we want to change. Just left it open. We have an equity of $25,000 in there for an equity advisor.
Is that necessary?
It's in
Professional services,
services
yeah.
and town administration. Do we have any? Do we want to continue going forward with that?
I am not in favor of going forward with that.
I'm not either.
So is it, you sensing a consensus on that one?
I've heard two. If you have one more, I'll take that as a sign to take it out.
Ethan, are you an equity advisor or not?
I'm not speaking on that.
I thought you
Put me in the
should do that.
newspaper tomorrow. Ethan Lawrence said remove their equity advisor.
Well, there's enough training out there that I don't really think you need, that your employees can take. I'm through VLCT with equity training. I don't know why you would need it, and somebody to
it's,
supervise it.
If you saw it in I'm not going to push strongly for it.
No.
I think even as it is, it's kind of a question mark across the county. It was an idea that was put forth
Yeah.
to see how communities felt about it. There's 6 or 8 that are interested. I know of one already that's dropped out for funding reasons. And it's, there's training out there. It'd be more of a dedicated resource to call on, help us with our policies, help us with training, getting beyond what the resources that we have had, that we have taken advantage of. So I do think there's value there. I also am hearing and don't disagree that maybe this is not the right year for it.
Yep.
And I from conversations with my fellow managers, I think that's kind of the conversation across the county, is that there's a desire and a need for it, but this may not be the year.
It would be great, but we also need to tighten our belts, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure where I want to go with it either at this point, so. All right, but I guess something to consider whether we want to move on that one. Anything else on town administration?
The only other one I had in there was the training and conferences, and I just wanted to, I had to put a star there. I don't know if I already asked the question on budget day, but are we confident we're going to spend the full 5,900, less than 5,900, more than 5,900? Does that number seem accurate? And then there's a small decrease, but I think it was reflective of your. I think I am recalling a little bit of a conversation we had on budget day.
Yeah, you brought it up. My recollection is that you were asking to make sure there's enough in there that we get the training. I think last year we might have overspent it, I believe. It's one of those ones where that is the best projection we have at this time. That's, we go through and we look at where the ICMA conference is. We factor in a couple of the statewide conferences for myself, for Karen. I think Travis has a training or 2 in there. Sometimes when you actually buy the plane tickets and you book the hotel rooms, they end up being more than you had originally projected. So similar to your question earlier, I'm confident that it's a good projection. Is it going to be spot on a year and a half from now? Probably not to the dollar.
And then my last thing here is the legal services. I just wanted to make sure that the legal services, the $35,000, didn't include any legal services that were projected for 80 and 90 Upper Main Street.
Projected, it's tough to say. That these legal services are, that's kind of looking at the historical spending for legal and trying to factor that in. Every year is a little bit different. Some years it's going to be Upper Main Street. Some years are going to have a lot of personnel issues. Some years it's going to be
Separation.
some crazy contracts, some separation. So that's honestly a tough one to predict. If we have Upper Main Street legal costs, it would fall into that line.
Right. Which I have a huge problem with.
How so?
Because any funding for 80 and 90 Upper Main Street should be voter approved and taken out of funding for 80 and 90 Upper Main Street or ARPA. And it's not, there's no line item transfer here from, if there is any remaining ARPA. I don't see any line item transfer here to the managers or the administration.
No, ARPA, we're down to our last $5,000 or so of ARPA money. And
Yeah.
I think we're going to be spending it on Upper Main Street.
We have to spend it or obligate it by the end of this month.
Right.
So yeah, so that that pooled money will be complete.
Yep. May not be a popular opinion, but I'll say it anyways. Upper Main Street, you as a board have made the decision to go forward with that. I know it's not unanimous, but you've made that decision to move forward. Very likely it's going to result in a bond vote at some point in the next few years. There's also preparation to get to a bond vote, to do that research, to present something to the voters, similar to any other project that you're authorizing, that you're looking into. Sometimes you need to spend money to get it to the point of taking it back to the voters. I would put this in that case. I'll disagree, but that's kind of where I feel or sit on it.
And once this budget's approved, then it's authorized to spend that the way the manager sees fit. So.
It just doesn't say $25,000 for binding contracts at 8090 Upper Main Street in the memo. in the description. But that's all. Nobody will hear me if I don't say it. So
No, that's fair. And you know, honestly, Ethan, it's one of those things where maybe there's going to be I'm just completely hypothetical here, but
no worries.
there's going to be
No
maybe
worries.
very little movement on it, and we don't spend any money. And then a year from now, it's ramping up, and we are spending thousands of dollars on legal fees for that. Please don't take it wrong. It is one of those ones that's a little bit tougher to predict, and this is our best.
Excuse me.
All right, anything else on town administration? Okay, town legislative, on page 22, that's us. Any comments or concerns here? It's our salaries, it's the stipends. Our professional services. Conference trainings and dues, includes front porch forum, I think.
Stipends is one that you've been asked about, that you've talked about, that I've heard a little bit. If you want to discuss that or keep it in there.
Now, Don, you've expressed concerns about it
I am the
before.
one that says I don't think they're working. When it was sold to us, it was so people could come to a meeting and they could pay for a babysitter, or one spouse to the other could reward the other one for because they took the night off and they could take them to dinner, and we would attract more people to apply for commissions. I don't see that that's happened. Yes, we've picked up 2 or 3 people lately for commissions, but look what happened with DRB. We ended up with no new blood, basically. People are being paid their $50 stipend for sitting at home on Zoom. I don't know if they're there. Their picture's there. I can't tell if that person's in a meeting or not, especially if they don't say anything. But the purpose was to get more people here, more people volunteering, and to, provide some reward for the rest of the family because we took a family member away to come to a meeting. And to me, the stipends are not working that way. So that's just my opinion, but I just think that it's... And the people that we've interviewed, it said, does the stipend make a difference when you applied? And the majority of the answers were no. So they said they appreciated it, but it didn't make a difference on their applying for the position. So I just think it's maybe time to either revisit it or eliminate it, or I don't know. I don't see it working the way it was sold to us when we first funded it. So.
I've heard anecdotally of one person who does need it in order to participate. Nobody who's publicly spoken about it in our meetings because it's private information.
Right, I get that.
But I know of one person.
I'm just saying, one out of how many, Andy?
Right.
But
I knew this was going to come up today, and my suggestion was going to be that we cut the stipend program. We should also forfeit the salaries for the select board position.
Charter says we got to get $500, but we can cut it back to that.
But on another note, in 330 professional services, I was curious about the $10,000. That's for miscellaneous projects such as the salary study for the AFSCME contract, and I was just curious that is that an installment payment that salary study costs roughly $30,000. It happens every 3 years.
Yeah, that's that. Arguably, it's a carryover. We put it in there because it's for those types of things. We're not expecting to spend that on the salary study the next year. We just wrapped that up about a year ago. But typically, it's once every 3 years. Those professional services items are for stuff like that. So next year won't be that. That's where it might be a little bit confusing.
Okay, so that cost on the 3 year mark is roughly $30,000.
Yeah, I think we spent about $30,000 on it. Maybe it might have been less than that, but we got 3 or 4 different quotes on it, and we went with the cheapest one. We thought it was the best one as well, but the other quotes were in the $45,000 range.
Okay. Can we make a note to bring that to the next budget session?
What exactly? The cost?
Yeah, the 3 year cost on that when we spent it last year. I know that's going to be in the audit from last year's. I didn't see an actual.
Just find the contract for it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I might have missed it, but I didn't see an actual on that.
Just for the salary study.
Well, I see that the actual from 2024 is 10,339.
That was printing and binding.
Oh, sorry.
Yep. Professional services was the actual was
38.
38,000. That
Yeah.
would have included the salary study.
So we'll have to tease out what specific element of that 38,000 it is.
Yeah, because you got town meeting dues 14,509. You got recording secretary 4,700. Front porch forums
porch,
also
yep.
in that same line item.
Right.
So you're asking for more details about the professional service?
Yeah, I mean, I have 52 $5,000 to $10,000 items circled. Not to be a pain in the butt, but I don't. You know, if we don't find huge savings, I think that there's small savings.
Stipends was the other.
I am in agreement with Andy on the stipends, though. I want to publicly state that, in my mind, if there's one person who is able to attend, being a public servant in our community because of a stipend program, I'm all for it. I wish that it was utilized more for the need of what it's used for, but I fully support keeping that in order to have a wide range of participants in our community.
Do we have a feel for how many of our volunteers actually collect it? I don't want names. I don't want to list the names. Just
Yeah, I know I approve them pretty regularly.
They actually all appear.
I'd have to get just I want to
check
get you
marks.
some more details. Anecdotally, it's
Yeah.
probably anywhere from 2 to 5 members per board.
Yeah, yeah.
But we can try to get some more information.
Okay. So did you want us to consider dropping our stipend, our salaries?
If we consider dropping the other one, sure, but otherwise I would leave them both as is. I mean,
Okay.
I think it's a small price to pay for endless hours on both sides of that, from the select board and from the committees and commissions. I think it's a thankless job that takes a lot of time, and you know,
Mm-hmm.
if we can help one person, it's worth it to me.
Yep. Okay, great. Anything else, select board?
No, I have a comment on the professional services.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Since we are not funding the 25,000 DEI position, potentially, I would like to know from staff if they could use more money in that $10,000 to make sure that the town funds its own DEI initiatives. I'm sure you said you have access to resources and stuff like that. Is there enough money in that $10,000 line item to make that a robust program?
Probably depends how we roll it out. And I'm sorry to not have specifics for you. It's one of those things where we can probably get some pretty cost-effective resources through the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, through the state program which we've participated in the past for free. But if we were to bring in a consultant and do town-wide training for staff or our board members, that's going to get expensive pretty fast.
Yeah.
So it depends how we use it.
Yeah. So I would just be interested to hear from staff if there was an increase needed in that particular one for that, because we did just pull 25,000 out of the budget for a potential position for DEI. I think it's good policy to look at our own staffing and everything and see what we could do and make sure that we have funding for that in our budget. My comment.
So
You could potentially argue back that the most cost-effective way to do it is the equity advisor.
I just wanted to point out that there's a line item in the town administration budget that includes DEI, support for DEI work. We're in the select board's legislative budget, so there's 2 areas to draw on for that. So I'm just,
One was 25,000. The town was 25, and the
the
other was
town
10.
was 8,000.
8,000.
Yep, and the 25 was for the equity
For the,
advisor. Yeah.
And that the 8,000 from the admin budget, it's one of those, it could be used for DEI. It has been used for DEI in the past. It could also be used for safety trainings. We've brought in somebody to do respectful workplace trainings. It's an area where we try to get, and we have gotten grants from VLCT in the past to offset some of those costs. So it's kind of one of those, depending on what the need is for the town in a given year. And we're probably due for respectful workplace training. We try to do that every 2 or 3 years, and I think the last one was a year or two ago. That wraps in some of the DEI stuff typically. But it's, yeah, we don't have a very specific, we're anticipating hiring this person to do this training. We don't have that level of detail yet.
Yeah. Well, I just think, since we did pull the 25 out, that it's important.
We didn't pull it out yet.
No.
We just put it on the list of consideration.
the 10,000 for the next.
Yeah.
So you still, if we remove that 25,000, there's still $8,000 in funding currently
Okay.
for the same line work.
And if that's sufficient,
And this is kind of, you know, now we're getting into how do we allocate funds? If it's going to be a townwide training for staff that I want to do as a manager, it's probably coming out of the admin budget. If you as a select board want to roll something out for all the volunteers on the boards and committees, it's probably coming out of your budget. These professional services lines, and sometimes we know that there's a salary study coming up and we have to budget for it. Sometimes this is the money for the stuff that's not even on the radar, and it's good to have a little bit of money there for whatever project, whatever surprise night comes up, and we have to hire a consultant or somebody for that. That's anywhere from firearms study we've done in the past, the workshops and trainings that you've had that have been facilitated, like the one we did a month ago. It's sort of that, it's there for the money's available, and that's why we try to look at historical spending and try to figure out how much do we typically use, and then, yeah, if there's something very specific that we know of, we'll put it in there, but otherwise it's more of a, okay, on average, we spend this amount of money. It could be any number of things.
All right, anything else about town legislative? Okay, next one is clerk, page 26. Questions about clerk? Go ahead.
in the clerk's budget, did we settle whether we were going to do mailings to all the residents for voting, or we're still going to not?
We are going to take that to you sometime in the next month or so.
Yeah, I think we would have it ready for the 16th.
Yeah, Jen Booker is working on that. We're anticipating that the answer is going to be no. That's what it has been for the past couple of years, but we do want to bring it to you for your consideration.
Okay.
And that's what's budgeted for.
We budgeted for not mailing.
Correct.
Okay. Well, for the people who request it specifically.
Other than the mailing, or the absentee.
Okay, nothing else in clerk. Next one, page 32, town finance. We don't need that.
What's that? Yeah,
We don't need that.
we're good.
That's like 600 in savings.
Yeah. This will be the insurance savings. A big chunk of that will show up here.
Yeah, the insurance savings will show up here. It'll also show up in the police department, which will be passed on to the city to some degree as well. And there's a little piece in fire which actually went up for their workers' comp, which is line 260 in there. And then there's also elements within the water sewer budget as well that were affected by the decline in insurance, but obviously wouldn't be part of this general fund.
Do you have the new number there, Dan, for the insurance line?
So within insurance for the finance department, it's 167,443.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anything else in finance? Okay, next one is IT on page 37. IT questions? hearing any. Move on to assessing, page 42, or did you have
Quick,
IT?
just a last quick question.
Yep.
We're not changing the fund balance transfer on IT.
The capital transfer?
Use of fund balance. Oh, it's not in there anymore. Okay.
Yeah, I think that one was eliminated.
Yeah. Yeah. That was last year. Sorry.
Yeah, there was a one-time
5,000.
purchase thing or thing going on there.
And we have taken out the $4,000 that was.
Yeah, there was a $4,000 budget in each of the past 2 fiscal years, or fiscal 24 and 25. Kind of discussing things with Rob and seeing the need kind of long term and where the fund balance within the capital fund is for this group, and determined that we didn't need to save the 4,000 at this point from IT there. So it's just, you know, eliminating that $4,000 operating piece here, and, you know, we can still fund it through capital, but at this point it's generally well funded, that line item within the capital budget.
So that'll reflect 0 then.
That'll be 0 here, yes, in fiscal 26. Yep.
I remembered reading something about IT. I don't remember where.
Okay, assessing, page 42. I still have a question in there about the comment about the $5,000 extra for the software, if we're delaying the completion of reassessment. I still read Karen's email response to say that she doesn't need that 5,000 this year, but she still has to pay for the existing software, but she has to pay for it in any case, in either case, is what.
Right, I'm trying to pull up her response. She doesn't need that $5,000, but she's gonna need money in that line item to pay for the software that she currently has, is the short answer. Do you remember the details? Is that
Yeah, I
correct?
think she needs 4,500, I think is what I recall her.
But she's got a $5,500 increase in here. So I think she's saying she doesn't need that $5,500 increase, or she doesn't need 4,500 of that 55. That's
I think that's more.
Yeah, I think she says in their total budget for that line item to be 7,500. So I think she's saying it could be
Down
reduced by 4,500.
Mhm.
I'm toward the bottom of page 79 in the packet.
We can get more
Yeah.
information and confirm that.
Yep.
And wasn't there an extension in the assessing?
The reappraisal?
The reappraisal or the assessing office for the year? Because we were under the
So
assumption
we've-
that we weren't going to operate, so we had $85,000 reduction, but now we are going to operate
The revenue piece?
on
Yeah.
revenue.
We're anticipating, that the shared assessing is going to continue for fiscal year 26, and that will result in about $96,000.
96,000.
Dan has, he brought
Yeah.
the exact number.
Yeah, 96,510 as a
510,
revenue now in that
96,510.
group. Yep.
And not to push you on the audit, but did last year's number reflect to be okay? Have you seen that at all?
Last year's number in terms of the revenue?
In terms of revenue and operating from between town and city.
Yeah, I mean, basically, you have our audit result within the packet here,
Right.
on page 93 of the packet, which is basically our summary of all of the city revenues between police department, assessing,
In here,
senior
93.
center, their portion of debt. That really encapsulates our fiscal year 24 activity.
Here.
That we
Sidewalk, yeah,
billed to
I
the
go
city
for that.
and then made a one-time adjustment to reflect our actual expenditure activity in fiscal year 24.
Right here. Assessor.
So in the
Saw the
assessing,
$3,000. That's what I saw.
yeah. So in the assessing case here, Ethan, we had billed out evenly throughout the year, $77,800. Our expenses were a little higher in the assessing department, so the city owed us more money to help cover those expenses. So we billed them $3,356 more to cover that additional expense beyond budget in fiscal year 24.
Okay.
So that's the number that you're seeing on this page.
Okay, and what did it? I'm sorry if I missed you on the first part. I'm trying to read and think all at the same time. So what did that bring the total to?
So our revenue in the assessing department in fiscal 24 is 81,167.
Okay. For 24.
For fiscal 24, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. That's in the document there. Yeah.
So,
Which was more than this 2024 budget. Okay.
It was more than the 24 budget, and since we spent more than the 24 budget, we billed evenly throughout the year, expecting that we were just going to true everything up at the end, which is pretty much the terms of our shared services, definitely within the police contract. So yeah, that was just the chance to level up and recognize that we had spent more in that budget for fiscal 24.
and that 81,167 includes the 3,300 that was extra billed.
Yes.
Okay.
Because the budget for revenue was 77,810.
Plus that.
Yeah.
number. Okay.
Which we had collected throughout the year.
Perfect.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of numbers
Oh, yeah.
in a lot of
No,
places, so I'm trying to connect the dots.
Sure thing.
Thank you. And if we could project another 3,300, that wouldn't hurt any.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have anything else circled. Circled the reduction, but we are going back to, so. Yeah.
You said Ethan?
I circled the $106,000 reduction in the budget. But we had, when we originally had talked about taking it out, there was $89,068 warrants. So now we add that back in. We're adding back in 96,510. So the reflective number will still be in what I'm figuring, and maybe I'm wrong, but that's still over projection of $11,000 in the assessing budget.
So the $89,000 number is this year's budget. And that's purely based on the percentage of anticipated expenses for fiscal year 25. And the same formula is being used for fiscal 26. We're just simply looking at our expenses, turning around and saying, okay, the city's going to give us that much more money. So basically, comparing fiscal 25 and the fiscal 26 proposal, we have $17,305 more of expenses in fiscal 26 proposed. And from that, we're going to get about $7,500 more from the city based on their share of the services.
Okay.
Anything else in assessing?
Are we gonna get a cleaner?
Yeah, I would say once we get through like the final process and
Like
have
in a
a
couple
final
days.
budget, we can have a final book, to replace all of the
My pen.
penned up, highlighted things that have gone on. So,
Want to
yeah.
do that?
Which part?
Replace these books with updated pages? Have we done that in the past?
We
I mean-
used to a long time ago, and it was. If you have a good idea, I'm all ears. Because otherwise, we're trying to print out pages and update this page and that page, and trying to tell you where to replace it. If you want to replace it, do you cross one out? Do you put one in? So, my thought was what Dan just said is that once we finalize it, that you get the final budget book.
Just the numbers, not all the information, though.
Yeah, but I was just thinking I'm not saying the whole entire book, but like
Right.
for things that we.
Where you've changed all your numbers.
Well, yeah, we said that it didn't exist, and then it also exists.
Just these pages.
Maybe
with
we
all
just
the
get
background
these
on all the
pages
back.
with the correct
Okay.
numbers on them.
So the updated summary sheets.
Yeah.
Right.
Like that. Sooner
Just
than
that way, when we have these conversations, I'm not trying to remember a month ago because
Yeah.
barely remember yesterday.
Well, I kind of envisioned it as redoing this book once
At the end.
that number is agreed on. Once we all know that one number, because we do need to put it on our website too.
It's got to go in the annual report.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's going to be there too. So so I'd like to have that information up there. I mean, obviously we have this first draft from a month ago that is, obviously a little bit outdated right now. That's on the website. So, just to have that available for the public, so they can vote on it as they wish.
Let's talk and see how difficult it would be to just print out the updated summary sheets for the next meeting.
Yeah.
Hand those out.
Yeah, if it was just the summary sheets in Excel, that's definitely a much easier task than, kind of proofing all of the background information. So, yeah.
Okay, community development, page 46. Any comments in here?
Did we hear a good explanation as to why the building structure revenue was down so much? Refresh my memory.
I think, and I'd want to get confirmation from Catherine on this, unless you remember, Dan. We'd updated our fee structure probably 3 years ago. We made some projections as to what that would be, and we projected high. So we're trying to bring it back into closer to actuals and be a bit more conservative in the projections there.
That's what it says on page 52, Greg.
Okay.
It was updated 2021.
But I'll confirm that with Catherine.
So the 11% insurance here, the $47,070 change, that's not reflective of what's
Sorry, which line are you at?
That is
210 group insurance.
That's largely going from the part-time person we have now, who is proposed to become a full-time person. That would be adding in the benefits.
Okay, so that's the new position, the 25 an hour, the $68,000.
It's the benefit part of that position.
The benefit part. Of
I mean,
that position.
so benefits are going to be going up a bit across the board. I think it's roughly, what do we say? 10,
Roughly, 9, 10, 11%.
For the healthcare premiums.
Yeah.
So it'd be going up a little bit, but then when you factor in somebody coming on with the benefits that they've elected, and I have to double check with Travis how that changed, if it changed during open enrollment. But as we were putting this together, the projection was that this person would be taking our benefits, and that's what's driving the increase there.
Yeah.
Because I had written down $101,000 total was what I had asked the day of, but then when I reflected on the numbers, I had seen roughly $115,000 in change. So I was curious if it was the right move to change that position to full time. If the group insurance line item went down across the board, and then I had wrote down the 101 total, that brings the new position was 25 an hour. I wrote down 68,000. It was 101 total. It would bring the department to 4 employees. Reflectively on the budget, the change in the budget was 1.2%. So my proposal here was to keep the position part-time and save, give or take.
It's the big driver. But it's really a service level thing to take some of the workload off the existing staff who's going to be supporting a new board and providing that work. So the existing staff we have, who's great at a part-time position, is willing to move into that full-time role if it gets approved in the budget. And it really is to provide the services based on the changes that have been made to the development review structure.
So is that $14,000 reflective in the savings from the group insurance line item savings across the board? Are we still at 101, or are we at $115,000 to change this employees to a full-time employee?
I think you're talking about the liability insurance. Is that what you're referring to as going down across the board?
Group insurance is
It's benefits. The other insurance that we were talking about that went down is the
Like property and liability insurance.
so the group insurance didn't go down.
Group insurance is basically healthcare.
Right.
Healthcare costs. That's
That
going up.
didn't go down.
those are all
No,
going up.
that's going up.
Okay.
I think it's like a roughly 10% increase in healthcare.
I wrote down 11. Yeah.
Could be 11.
Yeah, I think it depends which plan. I think most of our employees are like 11%
Right.
based on their plans, and there's a few that are 9.
Mhm.
Okay. The numbers don't make sense there to me, but okay.
Well, so
All of the increase isn't due to one employee, though.
so the
Well, I understand. Yeah. But
So the-
where's the 11%?
so the 2025
Health insurance costs.
budget is
not here.
$105,000 almost.
Yeah. So 105, add
105.
11,000 to it.
Times 1.11. That brings it up to 116,000.
That's what I had, was roughly 115.
Okay, yep. So yeah, so that gap between 116 that you might expect is
35.
turning this position from part-time to full-time, and this person now qualifying, for that
Right.
The difference
insurance
is
plan.
$35,000, which is the cost of a family plan.
Right. So that's what I had wrote down. So 35,000 plus the 68,000 is $101,000.
Yeah.
Which is reflective of a 1% budget increase, roughly.
Roughly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure if that. See.
That's what I wrote all those down. I must have asked you the same day.
Yeah. No, that'll make sense. I can't remember if does that subtract out the salary? Let's see.
Yeah, the
The
30.
$30,000 in part-time salary right now, 29,000.
Yeah, I didn't look at bottom line. Bottom line, I circled the 133,398. That's 1.2% I had circled, but I'm not figuring that on 133. I'm figuring on straight increase from salary benefits.
Yep.
As $101,000 for 20 hours a week.
But then there's this part-time salary that the person is making that's no longer in here, that's been subtracted out. There's 30,000 of part-time salary that.
Point taken. Yeah, it's
In
coming,
the overall
it's coming close
line,
to.
you could figure in every single one of the adjustments up and down. There's like advertising, we lowered it by 2,000. You could figure
no,
all of
but the-
those in, right?
The ComDev budget is projected to go up $90,000, and that's without going through line by line. Yeah, a good chunk of that is going to be driven by moving to full-time staff,
Right.
from part-time to full-time. And I hear your point, and my point is that is a service level thing to support the changes that have been made within the entire ComDev development review structure for the town. And to give that adequate support, also the Trails Committee, the Conservation Trails Committee, the Housing Commission, the Planning Commission that's there, that is our strong recommendation, and it really could be more than that. This is in my opinion, a conservative ask for what the need is.
I get what you're saying too. It's $71,000. My apologies. Yeah, I agree. I just don't think in the face of inflation and overall budget constraints that it's the right move. That's just my opinion.
It was a townwide vote to go to a DRB. That's just part of the reaction to that.
Right, but in my opinion, we have the staff to handle that request.
I was actually gonna ask is that there is no option to have 2 part-time positions versus 1 full-time position? Since this is a primary job is for DRB support. Only because
It's not, yeah,
the town's had fairly good luck hiring part-time. I mean,
You say that,
Correct
right?
me if I'm wrong.
No, in this case, you are wrong. I'm sorry to be blunt like that, but yeah, this is, we are incredibly fortunate to have Brittany in that position right now, and it took a long time to get there. We had somebody else who was there, was doing a pretty good job, had to leave for health and personal reasons. But we had probably a good year trying to find a part-time person. I think we made 6 job offers before we finally got somebody in. That person was here for about a year before they moved on. Then we were fortunate to land Brittany. In other cases, it's worked out great. Kate we hired right off the bat in my office, and she's working out awesome. But the part-time is really kind of hit or miss. We've seen it go both ways. As far as this being, so Brittany's at 28 hours a week right now, so it'd be, if we're gonna do 2 part-time, I'm not gonna look to cut her hours by 8 hours. I think it's a show of, the need is there, we have a good person who can do it and can grow into it. It's not as if she's gonna be directly supporting the DRB, but it's gonna free up workload for the people who are supporting the DRB.
Yeah, I'm in favor of it too. Don, do you have a?
I'm okay with that.
All right, all right. All right, anything else in ComDev? Okay, economic development, page 52.
I have a question. It says Chamber of Commerce. We don't have a Chamber of Commerce in Essex.
It's the Regional Chamber of Commerce.
And what does that do for us?
It does a few things. It's they do advocate for the local economy at the legislature. They provide some seminars, legislative breakfast throughout the year. They do advocate on behalf of Essex. It's some of the minor stuff where they offer discounted ski passes or benefits that employees can take advantage of. Just for the sake of history, years ago we used to fund the Chamber of Commerce and the
Convention Bureau.
The Convention Bureau, thank you. They were both about the same amount of money, I think $1,500, $1,000. We scrapped the Convention Bureau because we really were not getting any value for that. Chamber of Commerce, we do see value.
And what do they do different than the GBIC?
Chamber of Commerce is more broad-based local economy stuff, I would say. They advocate more in the legislature. GBIC does a little bit of legislative work, but it's more, I'm stereotyping a little bit, but more focused on industrial type development, manufacturing type development versus the broad spectrum local economy.
And GBIC is also tied into making project recommendations to the Regional Planning Commission that are funded by federal dollars.
Correct. So GBIC was very supportive of us in the Center Road water main project and subsequent projects. They helped us get a great score for hopefully get federal funding on that project.
Okay,
The Chamber of Commerce runs a young professionals organization to try to encourage young people to stay in Vermont and to get connections. And so
Thank you.
Did they run the BMIs too, or is that separate?
What's a BMI?
It's like a business initiative groups where they go around and they reach out to all these young entrepreneurs, business owners, and they all meet with their ideas. And I've been to a couple different.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm pretty sure that's under the Chamber of Commerce too.
Okay.
Like it's like Burlington BMI groups. There used to be BMI groups in other towns, but unfortunately, there's very few young business owners who want to stay in Vermont. So that's their mission. But I'm all about supporting local commerce.
So the $1,000 for the Economic Development Committee, are they going to try to use that this year?
I hope so. Encourage them each year to use it. It's an area where if you're looking to save, I think you could make a point that it should be spent, and until it's spent, it shouldn't be.
I think they might want to make the point of reducing it to the highest they've ever spent, which would be about $700.
Yeah. They are planning and hoping to spend it this year. They want to do some more convening of businesses around certain topics, so providing some snacks or food, whether it's a lunchtime or a breakfast meeting. That's where, if members attend trainings and conferences, which we always encourage, that's where it comes out of. That's where it's been used in the past. So there are ideas to spend it until it gets spent.
It's been steadily reduced every year. So they started out with $3,000.
Yeah. All right. Anything else? Economic development?
I was just curious what we needed the $5,000 for professional services for.
That is for a CAPMA study. Wait, make sure I have it right.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
correct.
Go to the next
That's
page.
for
I know it's in there, but I just didn't know what.
CAPMA is the Chittenden Area Transportation Management Authority.
Mm-hmm.
Transportation-
good.
Yeah.
And Gene Sullivan is looking at working with them to do a study primarily around the Saxon Hill area to try to fill some of those local gaps in transportation, especially if GMT does not keep its services intact. I think that's going to be an important thing for our employers to try to make sure that employees can actually get to some of those locations who might rely on public transit.
Ethan
But
also.
there's no model for any public transit in our town, right? Other than GMT.
GMT, the way I understand this is more that the businesses in that area work together to find like a local ride share or a smaller van to fill some of the gaps from the GMT. Because GMT does not, they go kind of around the Saxon Hill area, but they don't go into the Saxon Hill area.
Okay. I just have a hard time seeing where that falls on the town taxpayer.
Well, this is a case where there's a $5,000 fund balance use that's proposed to cover this, so there's not a tax effect per se.
Well, I already paid that tax, so.
Fair.
It's, local economy and supporting the local economy,
Impact fees.
part of it.
When they're not charged, this is the result. You have to spend money out of the budget to cover things that should have been covered under impact fees. That's what happens.
Impact fees can't cover a study like this. Impact fees are more for capital-related stuff.
I don't see the need, but
Yeah.
we can move on if there's no consensus.
I can have another conversation with
A
you.
waste of money.
It's a one-time expense, more or less.
Yeah. It's going to be paid for with, or the proposal is to pay for it.
$5,000 out of fund balance, yeah.
Yeah.
Last year, they used $40,000 out of fund balance for economic development.
For a study which we're getting ready to start.
But we still don't have a list of businesses and their phone numbers and addresses that's been published.
Right.
Or distributed like it was supposed to be in 2019.
If you'd like it, I can get you a copy.
It's finally done?
Yep.
As of,
I think it's been a while. I'll double check.
oh,
It's been
okay.
done for a while, but
Alright.
I don't think it was ever promised to be distributed.
To the business owners that they're collecting the information
I
from?
don't know. I don't know. You're
I
right.
attended the
Business
meeting.
owners? Yeah, I don't know. I thought you meant just general.
It's been going on for about 5 years, but it's off topic, so I apologize.
Okay, let's move on.
All right,
See, waste of money.
next one, page 56 is Health and Human Services.
I have a question on this one. So it says that this budget segment includes costs associated with health officer and deputy health officer, but I don't see any salaries listed anywhere.
So this item has actually been paid through accounts payable. We might be approaching the time where we're considering changing that to a payroll type of item. But that's why it's not appearing as a salary or a part-time salary. It's paid through our accounts payable, as if it's a outside vendor.
Okay. So what kind of professional services are they using then?
It's the health officer, which is a separate position. We happen to have our health officer as a staff person.
I
This is
know,
additional
I know.
duties beyond that. If that person stopped doing it, we'd have to go advertise for a health officer. And that person would probably be paid as a contractor versus as a staff person.
Okay. And now we have to change that human services grant number then, right?
It will get adjusted once we have a.
Okay, so
It
I just-
has been
Yeah,
updated,
yeah, that number will just continually change as we make
Okay,
changes. Yep.
all right. Okay.
Anything else in Health and Human Services? Okay, page 59 is county and regional functions. This is where the GMT one is. When did you have a chart?
So, I had a question about this because we had level funded, right? And last year we had two active routes. Proposed moving forward, we only have one active route because of the closure with the number 4.
It's the 2
Or
and the
the
10.
2?
Yeah, the 2 and the 10 that run in Essex. The 2 goes from Five Corners out towards Winooski, so that runs through the fort, the small portion of Essex.
That's the one that stays. The 10 goes
Yep.
away.
The 10 is what would go away. Again, that 90,000 that they're asking for is assuming that the 10 is going to stay intact. 5 days a week. I don't think they have any intention of reinstituting or adding back in the Saturday route. That's been cut already. So
Right.
that the 10 runs right now 5 days a week. They are making their requests as if that 10 will stay in place 5 days a week.
And not end in November.
Oh.
Not end in
November.
July 1st.
We were told June 30th, 2025. It was because of school. They wouldn't strand the kids till school was done with the 10 bus.
With the 10.
They're,
That's what we were told at a meeting.
I might think, what was in November?
That was the 2 bus.
I think
got
that's
cut.
Saturday.
Oh,
It was the weekend service.
Yeah.
Weekend
Oh,
service
okay.
went away. Or it didn't. I saw the bus yesterday.
Really?
I saw the bus yesterday.
Well, my question was going to be if we could just fund it at like $45,000. Not give them what they're asking for.
I would have to double check.
Legally, if we can, is
Yeah,
my question.
that's the question. My understanding of the member agreements, and you're probably more familiar than I am, is that if those dues are assessed, we have to pay them.
Okay.
And that's why the recommendation is to budget at the 72,000, and if they charge us the 90, then we can find $20,000. If they end up charging us 45, great. I'd rather come up with 20 than 50.
So why can you change it from 90 to 71, but not from 90 to 45?
You could change it to 45. It's just that if the budget comes through and we do have to pay the 90, we're going to have to come up with $50,000.
Right.
So we can budget to raise 70,000 through taxes and dip into our unallocated reserves if we need to make up that difference.
Right.
My
And what is 15% going to be this year on our projected budget? You're going to have well, I can't do math today. 4.7.
15%? Oh, of our unallocated reserves.
That 4.7 to make that up.
17. 340. I can't do math today.
I can't. I'm like, I've looked at way too many numbers
Sorry.
the past couple weeks,
Um,
and I was
you
in
have
the car for 8 hours this weekend.
2.5 million.
2.5. I was off by. Okay.
So what is that?
2.5.
15%.
I doubled my number.
17 million.
2.5. Okay. We don't have to make any decisions today. I just have to ask the questions that I wanted to ask.
Okay, so we've gotten through many. It's 9:15. 9:10.
Call it a day.
I already asked my police
This
department
is
budget
where I'm
questions
gonna-
about the dogs.
We're starting to get into some other bigger stuff. We can keep going. We have 3 more meetings before we have to warn a budget, right? Yes, the 16th, the first meeting in January.
No, you get the 18th.
you
We're
actually
meeting
have
the
to-
18th too.
Well, hold on. So
Oh.
I'm going to.
Which is the next,
What's
next.
actually on the books right now is you have December 16th, and you have the first meeting in January. That's the time where you're going to have to, at this point, warn a budget number for your
You'd have a
public hearing at the end of January.
Okay.
If you want to hold an extra meeting in December 18th, the evening of December 18th was the best option that came back. And or you could add another meeting in the first half of January and still have time to warn the budget.
So a couple options. We can keep going.
We'll stop. Ethan can't do numbers anymore, so we need
Add
to
a-
stop.
How do people feel about adding that meeting on the 18th? Six to 10 is what it's, a 4-hour meeting on the 18th. That's a Wednesday.
Does that work for you?
Maybe it's my sister's birthday. I don't know what the plan is yet, but
Does she like budgeting?
She could come here and have.
work for the
meeting.
post
You can even
office.
get a cake.
So if we, but there's a couple things we should go through the rest of these sections, and then we need to make decisions. We need to actually give Greg time to respond to some of them, and then come back with, and we need to make decisions by the 2nd of January, right? Or no, the 7th of January, whatever that meeting is.
Whatever
I
that
think
meeting
it's
is.
the 6th.
Yeah, 6th.
Just filling out my calendar of meetings today.
So right, so it'd be the 16th, the 18th, and then I haven't had a chance to read his detailed thing either.
Yeah, I read through it quickly, but I just want to note before we call it a night that between the changes in economic development, between the increase in the overall police operating this year, which I know is going to be split in half, and fire and public works, it's like 4.6% of the increase in the budget this year. In those items, you can look through, break it down, and that's on a roughly on $110,000 for 1%.
Yeah, 114K. Yep.
So I just want to throw that out there, that if everybody's curious where the increase is, right now we're almost down to 6%, and 4% of that is in those 4 items.
You mean 4 of those 6%? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, not
Is
4.
in those 4 items. The police one, I still don't know where we're at with that because my chart doesn't match. This chart could basically just be, in the book here is not reflective of where we're at right now with what you gave us today.
Okay.
Right? Am I wrong about that?
What changes are in there?
For what we were to.
Just talking about like the police salaries and benefits memo
yeah,
from
right.
today. I mean, I was just trying to gather information from the past 5 years by department and subdivisions within each department for those police salaries.
So are we staying with the 310, 731?
So
I thought I
that
saw 260 something change too.
Where's the 310?
In the proposed budget, allowance for vacancies is $310,731.
Oh, for police, yep. Okay.
But I thought I had, maybe I'm looking at too many numbers, but I thought I had saw 260 something tonight.
yeah. So
That's a big difference.
well, the thing is, I think you need to include regular salaries, part-time salaries, overtime, group insurance, social security, retirement, all in there to get to the 310.
Okay.
That's going to reflect. the
Okay.
10%.
So it's not
It's not
just
salary.
So
okay.
it's not just
All
salary
right.
pieces. Yes.
Okay. That's why I asked. Because I was confused again. I'm like, where's this number coming from? But that's why. So that 310, 731 includes everything.
Everything personnel and benefits.
And that's still your number you're sticking with.
That's 10% of
The
our
10% is
salary and
where we are right now.
Okay.
And police salaries are tricky to project right now because we're going into negotiations.
Okay.
So with the anticipation of open enrollment ending here, and we knowing where things are going to go up another 35,000. We're at 6.6%.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody want to say how low they want to go? So we know. I'm not going to say we're going to stop once we get there. We got to have all the discussion about all the pieces, and then we can prioritize which ones we want to move, which ones we don't. But how low do we want to go?
I believe we made a goal as a select board to not be more than a 5% increase.
I don't remember that ever making that.
We made that as a goal for our select board
That
goals.
was our goal.
at the
Yeah.
beginning of the year.
I think that was for
I'd li-
fiscal 25, actually.
I like this
That was
day.
for last year. Yeah,
We didn't make any goals this year.
we did not.
I'll pull the minutes. Don't worry. We'll see if we did. But I would like to be at 4.9. I don't think it's unreasonable. I think that this town is being crushed by the burdening taxes that continue to rise. I understand it's not all municipality, but it's getting harder and harder to live here, and as a population with I forget what the exact percentage was, but over 60 years old. I'd like to know how many people are under 30 living in this town.
21% are over 65.
21%. So that number is only going to continue to rise the more that the taxes rise in this town. We preach affordable housing and affordable living and all these other things, and we spend.
So you want to pull about 200,000 out of the budget?
Yeah, I got the proposals to do it. Just need this an eye and an eye. But that's my goal.
Anybody else have thoughts on that?
I would go with the 5%.
In a year that's we're doing stuff that people have asked for.
Andy, Social Security people got a 2% increase.
Yeah.
Their Medicare went up 6%. The school tax is predicted to go up another 9 point some odd percent as of today. The governor made a statement. We can't keep asking. Yes, people want these services, but then we hear about how high their tax bill is. So it's got to be a compromise somewhere. So yeah, I'd love to give everybody what they want, but
It's a number we haven't heard before, so I don't know. Where?
You two have a target? Put you two on the spot?
I think we should kick a big portion to the voters and have them make a decision. And we can keep our increase well under 4%, easy. You read my proposal.
Letting the capital be what the voters decide on?
Oh, I see. You want to
I think
increase
if
the capital
you-
tax instead.
You pull, you ask the.
Can I ask him some questions about that then? If we have a minute to talk about that.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
So I was just quickly reading through, but is your proposal to plow every sidewalk in the town of Essex?
no, not to plow any. I thought.
If you look at Aaron's proposal, it will save substantial money. Because if you check out Aaron's proposal
Right.
to do the sidewalks.
$150,000.
Yep.
Okay.
Because his proposal is to contract out all the sidewalks. So the town wouldn't have to do it anymore, which would, you're always having a hard time filling highway positions, and you're always trying to pull those highway positions off, throw them in a sidewalk plow or something. You wouldn't have to do that anymore.
I thought that said it's going to cost exactly the same as it costs to do it internally. Because it's only talking about.
Yeah, well, I just saw the $150,000 to plow every sidewalk in the town of Essex, going into the capital tax, raising the capital tax to pay for it.
No. The capital tax. There's almost $600,000, which is a 5% increase of the budget right there. Boom. In capital. In the budget.
And I just want to say, I don't think Aaron has made a proposal that we contract out all services. I think that he provided information that if the town was to contract for all of those sidewalks, that's what it would be.
Right, well, that's basically pretty close. And
And
he
then-
said that's just assuming so many snow events, and he calculated out all the costs for the town that they currently have and got an hour and everything. So that's why when I looked at it, unless I'm missing something of his thing, he says we could contract out all the town sidewalks for $150,000, doing one sidewalk on each street. Again, unless I'm missing something, because that's in his email, and he actually asked the contractor, do I understand this right?
Right. Yeah. I don't think he's proposing that we do that. I think he was providing information.
Right.
And,
Well,
and,
right.
and
I
I can,
mean,
we can work together on Aaron and I can work on this and figure out
and
what a
that's why-
recommended staff option is. But yeah.
And that's why we could pull my proposal out of this meeting. That would give you guys a chance to look at it, calculate out some numbers. What I'm really interested in is if you pull the $600,000 out of the budget, what our increase to the actual operating budget would be if all the capital switched over to the tax rate, and what the overall increase to a resident would be. Because the capital rate generates, what, 170,000 per penny?
It's yeah, about 160, 165,000. I'd say.
Yeah, but the budget 1% is only 114,000, right? So every increase up. So there's a disconnect there between what the actual, if you pulled out 5% of the budget for the capital and you increase the capital tax rate, what's the overall tax impact?
Wouldn't the capital tax be more expensive to the taxpayer just based on the numbers that you just shared?
Well,
Because
no,
the
see, that's
operating
what's
budget
confusing
has
because it
revenues.
shows the tax rate on the budget going from like 70 cents to 75 cents. And then your proposal, the capital tax would have to go up a nickel. That's the same, isn't it? So that's where I'm confused with the information. So you could, if you had a chance to look over that proposal and come back next time, that would be fine.
Okay. Yeah, we can work on that. I do just want to point out too that this presumes that you want to plow at least one sidewalk on all roads.
The contractor, yeah, not.
Well,
the-
no, either way, because that's a $75,000 cost, whether the contractor does all of it or whether the
Right.
contractor takes on the stuff that we're not doing right now.
Right,
So-
yes, it's additional to what we're paying now,
Yes.
but, and that's perfectly clear.
Yeah.
And that might want to be its own. If we do go forward and invest it, you might want to make that its own line item. Shall the town of Essex plow every sidewalk in the town of Essex?
I mean,
Because he might not get as many yays as maybe he will. I don't know. But
Yeah, that's a, but we, you wouldn't be able to do it this year. It would have to be for next year.
For next year.
Because you gotta have a budget for this year.
Right.
And you can't have a budget, one question depending on another question.
right,
Yeah.
you wouldn't be able to do the capital either because you wouldn't know that the capital passed before you pulled 600,000 out of the.
Right.
And quite frankly, somebody who doesn't walk on sidewalks and pays an astronomical amount of taxes in the town of Essex and is responsible for a bunch of things that others aren't, I don't think that they should be. I think that their school should maintain the sidewalks around the schools, and
that's not
know?
what's happening in a lot of places. Sidewalk maintenance, you require all your,
Yeah,
Never
so
mind.
let's,
yep, go through the proposal.
so there's been at least two folks that've said 5%, 4.9, where they'd like to see us go, which is the order of 200,000. That's, there, it may be that some of the stuff, some of what we're talking about here will get us a portion of the way there, but I'm not, you say you've got a whole plan to get us there, but we can work through that
open
over the
books.
next
Let everyone
time.
hear it.
Send it along
All right,
so they
so
can
we're
look at
It's
it.
all in here, though.
Are we in agreement that we want to move on to the next budget item, or the next,
Agenda item?
So, okay, well, to be continued? Okay, all right.
Thank you all for your hard work, though.
Yeah, thanks for the feedback.
Okay, next one is item 6C, consider approval of letter to Vermont Department of Taxes regarding the improper collection of local options tax. A second edit of that letter came out. Anybody have any comments on it?
It looked better than the first one.
The one thing I noted in the second paragraph, it says when the Vermont Tax Department is notified, I think we need to clarify what they're being notified of, perhaps. And I did send you these words earlier. You could say, when the Vermont Tax Department is notified that a business has incorrectly applied the local option tax,
Thank you, Dan.
comma. And then perhaps the last, at the end of that sentence, instead of repeating the local tax, it just say, I'm gonna read the whole sentence. When the Vermont Tax Department is notified that a business has incorrectly applied the local option tax, we expect that the business will be given notice of the correct manner to determine whether to apply it, rather than a repeating local option tax, or local tax.
Makes sense to me.
Having set it aside and reread it, it's like, oh.
I was just gonna make a suggestion that we vote as a board to to approve the chair and vice chair to iron out the wording and send the letter. That way we don't have to keep bringing it back. Anybody else comfortable with that?
I would second that.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Is that adequate for what we would need? I think so. All right. Does everybody understand the question? The motion is to have Tracy and I work out the language with staff and then send a letter.
And then send it, go for it.
All right. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes 4-0. All right, we'll work that out. Next thing on the agenda, we have a executive session, so we'll jump forward to the reading file. Any comments?
I have comments. I wanted to thank Tammy for putting in the fact that the petitions for the select board are open and they can come pick them up. And I'd like to announce that I am not running, so there will be an opening.
Oh, wow.
You're not.
5 years is enough.
Oh,
Sorry to hear it. Thank you
yeah,
for
yeah.
like give it and
Just
look forward to the next.
Please move on.
All right. Any other board member comments? Not related to Don.
Thank you.
I just was curious about the village center. Who determined the boundaries?
Excuse me.
Just curious, because you didn't include some section of like the supermarket. And just wondered.
I'm going to let Catherine speak in more detail to that in a couple
Yeah,
weeks.
just-
I
What?
think it is something to do. Oh, okay.
Well, because the outline is actually the original Essex Center.
The outline that's there.
Right, there was no shopping center there. It was a farm, so the shopping center would have been included in Essex Center. I mean,
Okay,
in the,
that,
so,
that answers the question.
sorry.
And then I think it also says in there that a different designation would be asked for the portion of Route 15 between there and.
Like a neighborhood designation.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the state designation program is changing. So.
It's changing, so yeah. Right.
And the only other comment I would make is, I noticed in the current status public works projects that they are moving ahead with some proposals for a stormwater utility, and I would like to express support for that.
All right, so let's see, we do have any other comments?
I got a motion.
All right, great.
Move that the select board enter into executive session to discuss the appointment or employment or evaluation of a public officer or employee in accordance with 1 VSA section 313A3 to include the town manager and deputy manager.
Second.
Thank you, Ethan, thank you, Don. Any further discussion? All those in favor of entering executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion passes 4-0. All right.
No action coming out. So
Okay.
yeah.
you come out and adjourn, but
Yeah.
there's no action.
Yep, all right.
Thanks, everybody.
So we get.